Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this overview and scrutiny board of the BCP Council. Can I welcome any people who may be watching this from home this afternoon? Warm welcome to you. Before we kick off, I'll ask Democratic Services just to give us a brief about the conduct of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to do so by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on the video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and please mute or turn off your microphones when you are not talking. If accessing via Teams or would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. Please refrain from using the chat function in Teams except for recording a proposed motion. If a vote is required on any issue, I will call out each board member's name in turn, starting with the Chairman and Vice Chairman, who may respond with for, against or abstain, or a vote may be taken by a show of hands. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please could you ensure that any background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Claire, do we have any apologies?
Yes, we've received from Councillor Millie Earle and from Councillor Dwayne Farr, and we've been notified of a substitute member for this meeting for Councillor Earle, and that is Councillor David Brown.
Thank you very much.
There's a message
saying
that Councillor Allison's outside, you can't get
to. Okay, all right, thank you.
I didn't say.
Okay. Councillor Allison is not in the building, but he is trying to get in, so we're going to go and let him in. Okay, so I think we'll just wait actually and wait for him to come in to the meeting. So if you don't mind, members, we'll just hang on for a second.
In case he went the other way up.
Max, you just want to hold the live feed just for a minute? Thank you, members. Councillor Allison, thanks very much. Sorry you got stuck at the door. Members, agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any local interest they wish to declare? Nope. Okay, agenda items 4 and 4A, confirmation of the minutes and the action sheet. Can I just have, anybody got anything to say about the minutes of the last meeting? No. Okay. The action sheet, there was one action on there, and that was for me to write to the planning department to check on the status of the public toilets at Ball Quay, which I have done. I've not had an answer yet, but I only wrote to them last week. So, but we have put that in train. So hopefully we'll get an answer. I understand they've been closed for a long time. Yeah. Okay. Right. So agenda item 5, public issues. I need public issues.
There's no public issues for this meeting, Chairman.
There are none.
None.
No. Okay. Okay, so we move to agenda item 6, scrutiny of finance and transformation related cabinet reports. And the first one is the financial outturn report for 2020-21. And I understand that Councillor Mellor, Leader of the Council, Portfolio Holder for Finance and Transformation, is here this afternoon to present that to us. So welcome, Leader. Would you like to introduce the paper? Thank you.
Yeah, I would. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, so this is the financial outturn paper. I think it's pretty plain to see that it's it's hugely positive in terms of the 5.1 million that we can now allocate to earmarked reserves. So there's a surplus of 5.1 million in our financial outturn. If we take a step back and actually look through the year we've all been through, and the the really quite scary numbers at certain points, I think we had a 50 million plus MTP gap at certain points last year, with all the increased costs from the pandemic. So and our reduction in income from things like fees and charges, so car parking. So to have actually got through that year with a surplus of 5.1 million, I think a huge amount of credit has to go to our finance team led by Adam Richards. Also, the massive investment that's come in from the government has effectively done what it said it would do at the start of this pandemic, which is put forward the funds we needed to deliver the services for our residents. So so that's the meat of it, Chair. I'll just highlight a couple of extra things. Really, we've got in from the drug and alcohol service, the homelessness. We're accepting 0.4 million from the criminal justice system grant. I think I'll leave it there, Chair. Sorry, only last thing I wanted to mention was that we're actually retaining the COVID outbreak management fund as a contingency, so built-in contingency for the rest of the financial period, as we look to see what different restrictions we might be hearing later on today, and going forward will how they will impact us. So, Chair, really positive outturn report. Very happy to take any questions. Adam Richards is also here with me to answer any more of those detailed questions as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So, members, the floor is yours. Anybody like to speak? Okay, Councillor Cox, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo actually what you were saying, Leader, that it is a very good report. There's no doubt about it. There's a surplus of 5 million from who were potentially destined at one stage is remarkable. And I think you're right in terms of the credit where credit's due, is that I think the government have pitched up here and certainly provided this authority and many others with an extraordinary amount of COVID related grants, which have been used to support either both budgeted and unbudgeted expenditure. And one of the questions I was going to ask really was how much budgeted expenditure was used, was covered by these grants, and potentially what kind of problem that might be in the future if we don't have that in the future, because as eggs is eggs, we're not going to carry on getting this kind of money from central government in the future. And therefore it's the future that I'm particularly concerned about. And then the other aspect of these results is what might amount to a kind of tsunami of problems that in the future. I noticed that in this year that in adult social care particularly, we stopped services, stopped providing services in this field, and therefore what problems are we hiding in the future, which we need to be providing for, because the problems. I actually heard on the way here a Conservative MP talking about the potential extension to the lockdown and what kind of issues that we're going to get in the future from mental health problems and physical health problems, and therefore we will probably need all of this cash to cope with that problem.
Leader, was that something you wanted to respond to?
Yeah, happily, and I also appreciate that Adam Richards has got his hand up as well. I think Councillor Cox is right to say that we're in uncertain times and we remain in uncertain times. I think it's also right to say that the changing profile of risk is a very real one, and effectively the cost and expenditure we'll have going forward will be different than the cost and expenditure we've just seen. I think we'll come on to it in the next report, Chair, but the MTFP does also show a materially improved position, and on top of that our earmark reserves are materially improved. So I think we can say we're in a better position than we have been for quite some time to deal with the pressures that come before us. And I'd also just like to say, that's in the context of us, a changed financial strategy, under this administration, which has enabled us to invest significantly in services. Councillor Cox mentions adult social care, and I'll just remind members that we put an extra £13 million into adult social care in the budget we just got in 2021, as well as additional expenditure in terms of assistive technology, and also that we're again coming to later to talk about some of maybe the transformation work we're doing as well, which should transform that service. So I think it reflects the basis that we're in a much more resilient financial position. We are able to invest, and that's invest in our services, invest in our place, which should enable us to be more resilient going forward. But Councillor Cox is right to say that there is we're in uncertain times, and that's why we need a resilient financial strategy. Adam may well be happy to answer more detailed question as well.
Yeah, Mr. Richards, did you?
Yeah, thanks, you Chair. And for the purposes of the tape, my name is Adam Richards. I'm the Council's Chief Financial Officer. Probably just to echo some of what the leaders actually said, in the sense that the financial strategy report, which is the next item on the agenda, actually sets out that as part of the process for setting a balanced budget for 22-23, the financial strategy would suggest that we go through the 2020-21 financial outcome with a fine-tooth comb to identify actually what the impact will be and the period going forward, both positive and negative, with regards to financial position, recognizing that when we set the budget, that will be the fourth year of a BCP council, and the outturn in front of you is only the second that process. With regards to Councillor Cox's question with regards to variations from the budget, appending 1 to the financial report provides that detail with regards to all significant variances over £100,000 compared to budget. However, I think it's fair to say that sometimes how things changed by COVID meant actually seeing the difference between the budget position and the impact of COVID was quite difficult to see as part of that process. And good examples of that, the hospital discharge program and the Everybody In program with regards to homelessness, as to see what you would have spent originally and what actually was COVID related, is actually not as clear as perhaps many would like to think it should be.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Councillor Cox. Yeah. Members, anybody else? Okay. Councillor Howell.
Yeah, it's just a brief comment. Clearly it's very welcome the way the government has funded us. I'd just like to point out that part of the reason that the council is in this good position is because the previous administration managed the council finances very well and was cautious in its investment once it realised that the COVID outbreak was going to have very serious implications. So the leader has been keen to emphasise his administration's impact, but it was built on sound foundations of the previous administration. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, partly to reiterate what Councillor Howes just said, that obviously this is the outcome of the 2021 budget year, which we put forward February of last year, and I think obviously it's very difficult to really sort of work out the comings and goings, because it's been an unprecedented year, and because of the amount of sort of government grant funding and the complete impact on services in all sorts of areas, income levels and service delivery, etc., from across different service units. And I agree, obviously it's good that we've got a positive surplus outturn, and it's sensible to be putting that into the reserves, because we still have a very uncertain future as the pandemic sort of continues, and restrictions continue. We don't quite know how what the new normal will be, so I think it's very sensible to put that surplus into reserves. I do note that the unprecedented amount of central government funding there. There's something like £43 million in different grants, and 34 million as well. I think it mentions about specific funding for specific related to the pandemic as well. So quite an unprecedented amount of additional funding from central government. And what I would say is that that's probably because we did a good job in the early part of the financial year making the case to government that they really had to, by painting the picture of what the potential financial outturn for ourselves and with the LGA for councils right across the country would be. It was only really because of that pressure that the government really sort of stepped up to the mark and did deliver on their promise of funding the impacts of the pandemic on the local authority. But I think there are cause for concern in a number of the sections. If you look at adult social care, the children's social care overspend of 6 million there, the regeneration economy, £16.4 million overspend. There's a lot of uncertainty in those areas, particularly around car parking income. Yeah, the car parks will full this weekend, but what's going to happen when people start returning to work? It's not. Yeah, a good weekend's car parking income doesn't solve the problem. It's the 5 days of the week, Monday to Friday, people going to work, people using the town centre shops. That's really where the impact will be. So I really hope that the administration have got well, and I'm sure our finance officers are doing their best to monitor and predict what could happen in these uncertain times.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Slade, I'll call you back in a moment to respond if you wish, Leader, and Mr. Richards, thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. It's just a couple of questions I've got from the paper, and I don't know whether, they are from this first paper, but if you want to take them in the second bit, I'm quite happy. The first thing is as referenced by Councillor Brown, the adult social care, the care home placements, says it's over budget, and talking about the placement cost being a lot higher. I'm just wondering, obviously we opened a Figbury Lodge, we bought Fairways, but what other actions are being considered to actually try and bring that back into line? Because with an ageing population, that's a problem that's just going to get bigger, as far as I can see. And then specifically looking at the papers, paragraph 145 still states that Poole and Christchurch civic centres are earmarked for disposal by the 31st of March 2022. I'm pretty sure that during recent meetings there was a lot of assurances around the Poole Civic Centre, so I'm just wondering if you can clarify what the plan is now and whether that's just a house needs fleshing out, because a significant amount of it needs to stay. Then there's the issue in the Towns Fund. Obviously it was disappointing not to get full 25 million, but understandable. The East Lift Cliff was not accepted as part of that project, so I'm just wondering whether that is something you're planning to fund, and if so, from where. And finally, on page 77, the list of the appendix A4 on what we've spent, it talks about £77,000 on drones for use on key busy days, and I thought that was something that we decided not to go ahead with, so I'm just wondering if you could just clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader, did you want to come back first and then maybe pass to Mr. Richards?
Yeah, absolutely will do. I'll start with Councillor Slade, if I may. So you're right to reference the risk in adult social care, and I think that's one of the reasons why we want to be more. We want to be more interventionist. I think it'd be fair to say in that market, both in terms of how we're transforming the service through transformation to allow people to stay in their homes for longer. Part of that is the funding we put in the budget on assistive technology. It's only a part of the solution. I think some really quite interesting work will be coming forward in this area. So the committee may want to bring forward an opportunity to bring the portfolio holder for that, so we can under what will be the new director of commissioning, in particular, and director of adult services. I think it'd be a really useful piece of work for Scrutiny to do. Not trying to direct you. In terms of your Councillor Slade, you mentioned about the Poole Civic. Yeah, very much the plan there in terms of, certainly what I'm aware of is that we're not to be disposing of a Civic. We're going to be utilising the core part of the building for to be retained effectively, which we believe will be fundamentally positive. There may well be development of the outside of the building, but my anticipation and expectation is we will first look to retain ownership of any of that. So if it's in there as is marked for disposal, it's certainly marked to have a different use than it is now. But we're not we're politically sure we're not going to be disposing of it unless we absolutely have to, which we don't look like we would need to be doing. In terms of your Towns Fund question, and in particular the question around the Eastcliff lifts, there's no current plan to reinvest any of the Futures Fund money in that. But one of the things we are able to do through the £50 million Futures Fund is to look at projects such as that we may want to then bring forward. So there's more opportunity now rather than just going to government for funding, but we can actually intervene again ourselves. So I don't actually have the answer on drains. I'm not aware of that, so I don't know if Adam will want to come in and have any more detail on that. Probably best. Should we do them individually, Chair? There were the three parts there. So Adam may want to come in on Councillor Slade, or would you like me to respond to all three people in one go?
I think if you carry on, Leader, and then we go to Mr.
Okay.
Richards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I wasn't, so I appreciate what Councillor Howell is saying, effectively around being the previous administration's financial strategy and prudence. I think is why we're in this position now. I wasn't going to bring this into sort of politics if I could avoid it, but I just need to put on record I do materially disagree with that. Cautious, yes. You cancelled all of the priorities and cancelled all of the spending. That was cautious, and maybe that was the right answer. Back in last June, we put forward a budget reset paper, which proved you could bring forward significant investment, and it was a time to invest, which are now, through the last 12 months, we've proven that was the right strategy, because our communities and our children, particularly the £1 million, families fund that your administration rejected, we've needed that money then and we need that money now. And this administration has showed back then and also now how you can do that. So yes, the previous administration was cautious. Was it right? I don't think so. I think we needed to be more bold and invest, and that's what we've done. That's a political choice. In terms of Councillor Brown, you said that effectively that it was because of this, the previous administration has held Robert Jenrick to account as to why they'd delivered for money. I see it quite simply differently than that. I think that what actually Robert Jenrick said right at the start of this was we will fund everything we need to do, and that's exactly what they've done and more effectively. So again, it's with 2020 hindsight, we can look back and say the messages we were putting forward last June and consistently since then have the government's delivered on. So where does that leave us, Chair? Investment up, a different financial strategy. Councillor Brown's exactly right. Car parking doesn't fix multi-million-pound holes. What does is a big plan, investment in our area, change financial strategy, and that's why we're in a better place now to invest and to have better aspirations for our futures as well, from a strong financial footing. So yeah, that's all I would like to say on those 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to highlight a couple of points in addition to the comments made by the leader. First of all, in regards to adult social care, a care homes older people strategy will come forward for cabinet consideration in early September. and therefore it will be at overview and scrutiny should you wish to consider it. Prior to that, as part of that process, the financial strategy, which is part of the next process paper, also makes a commitment to look at assistive technology as much as humanly possible to support adult social care and its future service delivery. With regards to this Poole Civic Centre and Christchurch Civic Centre, I apologise for the report including the word disposal. The leader is absolutely right. There is no proposal on the table to dispose of either of those two assets. It was used to signal the fact that there is an intended different use of those assets, and by using those assets differently, then it should, and the assumption is that it will deliver a significant saving towards the council's transformation programme.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, we seem to be dwelling on adult social care, but I wanted to mention item 27 on the actual main report, which does admit that the costs might be much higher next in the future. One of those reasons, obviously, is the care home fees. They will increase because that's due to staffing costs. There's no way round that. And yes, we've mentioned the adult social care strategy, which was started basically at the inception of BCP councils, and there's the staff rationalisation, for which read reduction basically, which is fair enough. I think that the managers are doing very, very well. So I have not really got a question. I'm really congratulating the officers and the staff of adult social care who've worked really hard since we started this this council. Officers and staff and the accountancy team as well, who do a great job. But my main worry is that given all these problems that we know will be in the future, we're talking about, what's that phrase we use? We are attempting to intervene in the market. Well, lots of councils have tried that, but let's hope we're successful. So I'm really concerned about what will happen if the money tap is turned off by the government. However, I know that the leader will answer that, and I'm sure we have plans for that, leader.
Did you want to come back on that, leader?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try and be brief because I think I've said some of these things but before. Thank you, Councillor Dedman. I think it's worth pointing out that and it's partly in the paper later as well, but in this paper here, we're increasing earmark reserves by 5.1 million. In the paper later, we're talking about a revised financial strategy to continue to increase unearmarked reserves so that they're in a stronger position. I think that will enable us to respond positively. But it is again, and Councillor Dedman said this, quoted me before about, I believe, intervening in the market. How do we do that? We build more homes, build more care homes if we need to. We can build more actual homes in terms of more tech-enabled communities, which enable people to stay in their own homes for longer. We can also have a big plan, which you talk about building, thousands of new homes, which will have a significant increase in our council tax provision, so we can invest, enabling us to deliver, investment in our key services. And like any business, if you invest in it, you tend to drive better returns out of it. But wherein this is so important, it's about better outcomes, isn't it? It's about if we can support people to live in their own homes for longer, or in better homes or more tech-enabled homes, they have a better quality of life, which is what we're all after doing as well. It just so happens, and my belief is, if we invest in that, we achieve better outcomes, both for the people in that situation, but also for us financially. So yeah, I believe that should adequately answer Councillor Dedman's question.
Thank you, leader. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just to emphasise, Councillor Dedman referred to section 27 of the report. What section 27 report also tries to do is highlight the fact that in regards to these care home placement costs, that actually £1.3 million was included in the budget for 21-22, and as a fallback position, there's also the tranche 5 £9.9 million of COVID emergency funding that the council would look to draw on to fund those costs.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Councillor Howell.
Yes, I'd just like to correct an inaccuracy that the leader stated. He referred to the Conservatives' reset paper as proving that they were essentially correct and right, where their reset paper was just a flimsy document that did not include any costings, and nobody could assess it against the council's financial position. It is true that the new administration has decided to borrow a lot more money for investment. That could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, depends how that money is spent. The early days doesn't look particularly good though, because as we will see in the next paper, a lot of the initial projects or statements that were claimed to be going to be progressed have stalled, and it seems that they're encountering the fact that actually there was a lot of good stuff going on already that they're deciding to keep in place, and are struggling through a lack of perhaps ideas to come up with anything new to supplement them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Sorry, Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Just want to get some clarity on something that the leader said about grant for children's services. I understand that we weren't offered a grant funding, but we did apply to the DFE, but we weren't successful, but we were given an advisor. I just wanted to make sure that it doesn't look like we weren't interested in getting grant funding, that actually we were applying where it was appropriate.
Leader.
Yeah, thanks again. I'll come back to Councillor Slade first. So I think the amount of money we've managed to receive from the government and the various different pots that we've managed to receive it from, and how that's such a materially improved position, just demonstrates that this administration is actively looking to receive all the grants available to it. I didn't remember specifically speaking about children's services in any of my answers, but previously. So Councillor Slade can direct me to exactly what I did say. We do have a funding support for an advisor on our children's services journey, who's doing a fantastic job in bringing all the stakeholders involved in terms of local schools, our children's services team, working with us all politically as well. And I appreciate the fact that we are not using the children's services as a political football, I think the term is. So that role is in there. But if Councillor Slade would like to direct me to exactly what I said in relation to children's services, I might be able to answer it better. I do like to come back on what Councillor Howell has said, Chair, as well, if I may.
Okay. Councillor Howell, I haven't invited you to speak, so you should wait for the Chair to invite you, please. Thank you. Councillor Slade, would you like to respond to that last point from the leader?
I haven't got the exact wording here, but my understanding is there was an implication about a rejection of a grant. If that's not correct, then I'm happy to stand corrected, because as I say, this isn't a political football, and I'm glad to that we take whatever money we're offered.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I can just say, Chair, my understanding is I don't recall that. So I think that is okay as put. Would you like me to now respond to Councillor Howell, Chair?
I think Councillor Howell wanted to come back again, and so if you would then respond to him and take into account what he's about to say. Thank you.
I look forward to doing that very much, Chair.
Now, my point was that this could go backwards and forwards. I think we've both made our points, and the leader is simply a contributor to this meeting for members on this panel to then discuss and comment and speak amongst themselves. I don't think it, the leader should be just permitted to endlessly come back on items. But if he's going to come back, then I'm obviously, if I disagree with him, going to ask to comment again. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think the point's been made, and I don't think there's any other members indicating. So now I'm going to Councillor Brown. Is it relevant to the outturn report, or is it another political football match we're into? Outturn report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just quickly briefly on that conversation, I think it's a case of people have to agree to disagree. People have different perspectives, don't they, of the budgets. I had a specific question actually on the outturn report and in the section about the movements in reserves. Obviously, very significant movements in reserves during the financial year. Various ones, refinancing the capital programme by from borrowing, so that's £25 million. But particularly, my attention was drawn to there's a £40 million sort of government grant reserve about NNDR COVID grants. It talks about the intricacies of the business rate system, and there's about £40 million of government grant funding which has gone into the 2021 reserve to be drawn down in 21-22 to offset the collection fund deficit million. I just wanted to check whether there's any risks around that, about whether that COVID grant will cover the deficit in the collection fund, particularly when it talks about circa 40 million. These are big sums. You only need 1 or 2% to sort of go either way, and you suddenly got a bit of a headache. So
yeah, I think that's a reasonable question. I'll ask Mr. Richards to respond to that, but I'd just like to add to that, if I may, and you can answer the points at the same time, because it seems to me that given where we were last year and where we are now, we should be celebrating the position that we're in. And in fact, I'm thinking, this is exceptional. Where's all the money come from? Have we got to give any back? What are the risks? Do we have to give any money back? So I think that sort of does relate to your question, Councillor Brown. So maybe we could ask Mr. Richards if he could respond to that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And clearly, when we talk around the collection of council tax and business rates, we're into a very technical area of the local authority's accounting position, because the reality is whatever the council precepted for the year, it actually receives for the year from the collection fund. And that can put the collection fund into a surplus of deficit, and then that has to be corrected in future years as part of the standard process we have for local authority accounting. In this instance, what the government have done is given a grant to compensate local authorities for the reliefs that it gave out for business rates to businesses during the course of 2021, but it doesn't actually have to pay that to us until 21-22 because of actually that timing issue of actually how it actually impacts on the account. But at that point, I'm going to pause and I'm going to pass the question over to Dan Povey, who is the council's technical expert on this matter. Dan.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Yes, so the 40 million that is referred to in the report as the Section 31 grant, we're fairly certain about that figure because that directly relates to the amount of additional retail and hospitality grant relief that we awarded during the year as a result of the government announcements to support businesses. So we know that we awarded about 80 million more than we budgeted for. As I say, that was a direct response by the government to support the businesses, and that is the council's share of just under half of it. So we're fairly certain about that. We'll receive the grant, or we'll have to account for the grant in 2020-21, but as Adam says, we will need to pay that back into the collection fund to fund the deficit caused by that in 21-22, and that's for why you see it going into reserves. I think where the uncertainty with the collection fund lies with business rates is that, as well as the deficit caused by granting that retail relief, there was some additional deficit, although a lot smaller in comparison, due to reduced collection rates and due to potentially businesses either going out of business or not paying their business rates. And that is the amount that we've been allowed to phase over the next 3 years. When we calculated the budget, we estimated that would be, I think, around £5 million for the collection fund as a whole, and our share is half of it. And that is what is based on our 75% income tax loss guarantee grant that the government are giving us. What we'll need to do over the next 3 years as we phase that deficit is look at actually how the actual outturn for the year compared to it, because if it was more or less, that will create a pressure or not, and then how the collection fund picks up during the next 3 years in terms of increased businesses and collection rates.
Thank you very much. Members, anybody else Okay. I'm going to thank you very much. I'm going to bring this debate now to an end. But in doing so, I just like, and I think that the last explanation we got is an indication of just how complex some of these matters can be. And the outturn report was extremely clear, and obviously a huge amount of effort's been going into managing the council funds over the last year. You know, how we actually got there, regardless of which political party was involved and when, the outturn is actually a fantastic one. But in actually getting there, there's been all these different government grants that have all got to be applied for and then put into the accounts. And it must have been a bit of a horrendous task. But I'd just like to compliment you on the job that Adam and your team have done in producing this report and actually managing the finances so we get to an outturn status as we have, which has got to be good and something we should all be celebrating. Notwithstanding that, we still are in uncertain times and there may be some horrible surprises down the road for us. But nevertheless, we are where we are today, so we should take some comfort in that. So thank you very much, Mr. Richards, much appreciated. So, moving on then, members, to the medium-term financial plan update. And again, I'll call on the leader to introduce this paper to us. Thank you, leader.
Thank you, Chair. And I just, absolutely endorse what you just said there. From the team, Adam's team, Nicola Webb was, a significant contributor, and if not author, to the financial outturn paper as well. So her work in it should be commended as well. And you just see with the technical expertise of Dan as well that this is a really strong finance team, and we're proud to have it. Chair, thank you for that. So then, in terms of moving on to the MTFP paper, okay, a few key highlights, if I may. I think we'll be able to see this moves from a 17 million surplus in 22-23, deficit in 22-23 to 10.1, so materially improved. We've got updates, detailed updates in terms of the transformation, profiling of spending along that project, which you can see in the paper. A couple of the highlights you'll see here, Chair, we're doubling the sustainability budget that we brought forward in February by an extra 240k, and we're bringing forward a further paper later in the year to talk about material investment in that area. So we didn't have enough time not to do that. There are significant revisions to the financial strategy again. So again, as I've mentioned in the previous paper, we're talking about improving unearmarked reserves. And it also shows that the detail in the paper shows how materially underburrowed we have been historically. So the real opportunity we've got there to invest in our area and our big plan. Where there is a agree to disagree or a different views in terms of how much of that is the administration or the different administration, I'll just set out for Council what actually has happened. So one, we have materially changed the financial strategy that's led to this MTFP. Two, we have brought a lot of capital back into revenue. Three, that's enabled us to invest in services, exactly what we said we'd do last June in the budget reset paper and what we've done. And four, what that enabled us to do is to deliver a budget in February that carries on investing in services whilst delivering, I believe it was the second lowest, if not definitely one of the lowest council tax rises across the unitary authority. So we've done exactly what we said we'd do last June. Now we're in administration. We may agree to disagree, but they are all facts. So, Chair, very happy to not endlessly come back, but take questions as and when members would like to.
Thank you, Leader. Members. Councillor Howell.
I'd just like to make the point, I'm not going to go on about this, but just two very small examples of how what the leader said is not correct. They're throwing some money at some projects they've invented off the cuff and realised they haven't got time or necessarily realising that it's perhaps not such a good idea. For example, ordering, spending £250,000 on barbecues and not being able to install them, and look at Coast Festival Live. Speaking to officers, I was referred to the Festival Live website to look at the supposedly new entertainment events that would be appearing in. I looked at pool, and all the events are on their existing events that we either they're already provided by third parties or the council provides itself. You know, the reality here is there was, you know, I fully accept that the leader came in with lots of ambition and wishing to, in his eyes, turn things around and invest more, but he didn't have a plan for doing that in detail, and as a consequence has been scratching around for ways to spend money, and that's not a good way of approaching spending government and public money. Thanks.
Members, thank you, Councillor. I'll ask the leader to respond in a minute, but this paper, of course, has a number of recommendations to Cabinet, and I would like, if possible, to focus in on those, because those are the important things that decisions are going to be made upon. And so those are the things we ought to be focusing on if we have problems with them. Councillor Cox, I know you want to speak. I'll just ask the leader to respond if he wishes to the last comment made by Councillor Howell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, we should be focusing on the paper. If Councillor Howell wants to keep straying into other areas, as it's a public meeting, Chair, I do need to correct him again. You talked about the barbecues. You know, they will be, you know, massively well used, and they will go in. It's a part of a longer term strategy. There will be more investment next year. It's going to be a long term asset. So again, I disagree with you. Talk about Festival Coast Live. We've got over 200 new events coming as part of that programme. As and when we're more certain in terms of the government unlocking, we have a programme we can stand up. It's going to be a massive benefit to this area in terms of animating this area by also bringing a lot of the attraction for residents and visitors alike outside of a seafront. So we created an animated place and a world-class place. So, you know, absolutely disagree. Says we don't have a plan. I think it's quite interesting, actually, when you're in an opposition. Back in last June, we weren't the administration, and we came up with a 25-page document that, you know, called a budget reset paper that was a plan that we've now delivered, that said we could invest more money, you know, for our communities. So again, you're factually incorrect. We then had a 100-day plan, which we put more money into cleaner, greener, safer, you know, things like that. And then we came forward with what is a big, you know, the big plan, which is, you know, £50 million of futures funded investment. I don't know how many more plans, you know, Councillor Howe wants, but it's certainly a lot more plans than he delivered when he was a deputy leader of this council. But Chair, I'd be very happy to move back to the paper if you would like to stop this endless coming back.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go into a bit of the detail really, rather than the political points going. If you look on page 103, paragraph 16, it quite clearly talks about the variances between the worst case and the best case scenario in these cases. And actually the best case scenario is about a 25% reduction in that £10 million, but the worst case is a 150% increase. So they are quite significant in what we can expect, because it's budgets are budgets, and they're never going to hit them exactly. It's going to be one way, one side or the other. And my concern is that it clearly demonstrates the uncertain times in which we're living in. And just to make the point again is that, you know, BCP has not had a normal year yet. And one of the things that most councils and finance departments and councils do is to look at what happened last year. You can't look at what happened last year. You can't look at what happened the year before, and you certainly can't look at what happened before that, because we didn't exist before that. So it is very hard, and you know, for I'm going to call him Councillor Richards, for Adam Richards and his team to try and predict what's going to go on in the future. And so I think he's been pretty prudent in what he's done, but I think that paragraph 16 demonstrates that actually we should be erring on the side of caution in anything that we do. One of the points I was going to make actually was to do with page 104 and paragraphs paragraphs 22.1 and 22.2. And that's to do with the reserves policy. And 22.1, you know, I think you're suggesting that we have a policy of unearmarked reserves, replenishing those over 5 years. I think that's pretty lame. I think it's a bit too conservative. We should be actually replenishing those reserves, adding to those reserves in a much faster timetable than 5 years. And it's one of the reasons in the budget I put forward is that, you know, we should look immediately to add something to unearmarked reserves. And on the other point in terms of the debt, you know, I appreciate the leader is very pleased that we have a low level of debt at the moment compared to most councils. Well, I don't like this comparison of comparing it to other councils. It's irrelevant. There are some pretty awful councils out there who are up to their neck in debt, and I certainly wouldn't want us to be anywhere near them. And if you start moving, because we're in the lower sector, if you start moving us to the centre, if all of those other councils in the lower sectors does exactly the same as what we're proposing to do, then that midway point will shift upwards, and we will start borrowing more and more and more, and it will carry on that way. So I think, personally, we should have the guts to decide what the right level of debt is for what we want to achieve, and not just pin it on a midpoint. Midpoint's irrelevant because it depends what the other people are doing. And if the other people are going mad, then, you know, we shouldn't follow them, frankly. That's a starting point.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I've got some very interesting questions there. But before you answer those, I suspect that Mr. Richards would like to respond to some of that. Would you like to come back to Councillor Howell, please, Leader?
Sorry, I don't believe I need to come back to Councillor Howe because I said I believe to.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
I'd like to respond to.
Go on, Councillor Howe.
Very quickly, it's very easy to come up with shoddy plans one after the other. At the end of the day, people are judged on what they deliver. You know, in my portfolio, we delivered purchase of the power station. We did some other things. There are things that we wanted to do which we didn't deliver. You know, and I look forward to 9 months' time when they'll have had the equivalent of amount of time in place as we did, and we can see in reality what's been done and what hasn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Okay, Leader, I don't know if Mr. Richards wants to take Councillor Cox's questions, or whether you want to come in first.
Could I come first, actually, if I may, Chair? Because I actually really welcome. I really welcome how that was put. Actually, I think it's really valid. You know, and I mean that very genuinely. Councillor Cox is absolutely right. There is no normal yet, you know, for the BCP Council, and we need to be aware of that. I think what we've done, and how I perceive what we've done, is we've created a lot more flexibility and ability through changing of a financial strategy to respond, and that means at the moment investing, but we have actually created more flexibility, and you know, in part by increasing the amount of prudential borrowing. What that's also enabled us to do, because we've been able to take money out of capital and put it back into revenue, we've been able to materially increase our reserves and our earmarked reserves, so our MTFP reserve. You've got the transformation reserve effectively as well. So I agree with what Councillor Cox is saying, and I don't criticise where we probably disagree, but it's a difference in strategy, and then that's for people's choice. So Councillor Cox says, you know, he would like to err in caution, which is a perfectly reasonable strategy. What we're doing is we're saying we need to invest in our place, invest in our area, and what actually supports that is the fact that we are materially, when I say materially, hundreds of millions of pounds, you know, under borrowed. So what we're choosing to do is invest in the business, invest in the place, which is it's something we both have experience of in our professional careers. Where I'm just trying to work out how to put this succinctly. What we're saying, again, I agree about effectively, what we need to do is choose the right things to invest in. We don't just need to borrow for the sake of it. Hopefully this gives Councillor Cox some comfort in the government have materially restricted what councils are now able to borrow for. So in terms of prudential borrowing now, we're very restricted in terms of what we actually can spend that money on. One of those things is regeneration. What does that mean? It's effectively buying houses, PRS schemes effectively. So it's increasing asset bases for the council. So it's not a risky strategy to invest in that. we can invest in service, we can borrow for services as well. But it's much restricted now in terms of what we can invest in. And I haven't said, I've been on record at any point saying we should invest in some of the, more how to best to put this, entrepreneurial initiatives that previous administrations or other councillors had. So just to be really clear, I completely agree in terms of where Councillor Cox started. We do have a difference of strategy: err on caution or invest. And I think that's the difference really. But it's perfectly good way of putting it. And ultimately, what is the right amount to invest? Well, something that supports the big plan that we've come up with, which talks about thousands of new jobs, thousands of new houses, creating a world-class place effectively. Businesses in recessions that don't invest, stagnate, and businesses in recessions that do invest materially move forward. That's our tactic. Time will tell. But I did want to come in at that level to answer Councillor Cox's question, if I may, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Mr. Richins, did you want to come back on the other points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In regards to item or section 16 report that looks at, in line with good practice, looks at some scenario planning and sensitivity analysis of looking at our medium-term financial plan and looking, and reflecting on that uncertainty and looking at the range. And Appendix B, which is the financial strategy, sets out in a lot more detail what that worst case scenario could be as part of that process. And what this section does, it reflects on the good, potentially what a better case scenario could be and that worst case as part of that overall process. But just to emphasize that based on that experience of the team and the council, based on professional judgments and good practice, that's where we come out at £10.1 million, with all that uncertainty, feels about right as the current prudent assumption, taking away any optimism bias as part of that process. With regards to good practice, can I also emphasize the fact that it is good practice to look at benchmarking information, comparing the council with other local authorities to help drive your financial strategy. And as the leader points out, that's what we've done. We've looked at the SIPFA Financial Resilience Index. We've built upon that by expanding it out and looking at not just unitary authorities, but other upper tier authorities, including counties and Mets. And as part of that strategy, we said actually, the first thing we want to do is look at the opportunity that increasing the council's overall debt position could create. But I think, as the leader really emphasised, that we won't do that without a robust business case. And that will be in line with the Prudential Code as to actually, what we under that code should be actually investing in at this moment in time, and regeneration housing are the cited examples as part of that process. Alongside that, we looked at the council's unearmarked reserve position, and we recognise the fact that as over that 5-year period we look to increase the council's overall position on debt, we're moving into a position where there is a greater level of risk, and it would be reasonable as part of that process to increase unearmarked reserves in reflection of that position. So in line with good practice, we're using that benchmark information to help drive our financial strategy.
Councillor Cox, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree that you've used benchmarking to derive what level of debt we can have, but it's a completely different scenario as to what we should have, and what we should have must be driven by actually the opportunities that you have out there, as the leader said, to invest in stuff that actually makes sense and that will derive dividends, let's use the expression, for the future for residents. And that's the key point. And I don't want us to be driven by the fact, we can spend £200 million because actually that's the average. That's irrelevant. Actually, what you need to be concentrating on is what's good to invest in for the residents of BCP. I hear what the leader's saying in terms of, he's driven by the investment, but at the moment, at the moment, all I've seen about investment is frankly all talk, and we need to identify what's going to be spent. Where are you going to spend this money? Because I'm frankly quite interested in where you're going to be spending the money, and I haven't seen that yet. And maybe I'm being impatient, but I think you need to flesh a bit more of this out in order that we can be reassured as to what actually you're going to spend the money on. Because at the moment, I see a lot of plans. You just listed out a whole series of plans, but I haven't seen terribly much action on the ground.
Is it all talk, leader?
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, can I just say, again, I don't actually disagree massively. Your keyword there, Councillor Cox, was can. This is money we can invest if we want to. It's not money we will invest unless we can find things that are worth investing in. So, but what we are able to have done, in our budget that we've just approved in February, is to invest much more in things like, the services that our residents need, £1 million families fund, 7.5 million extra money into children, 10 million quid into a capex around children, 50. So we are able to invest in our services because we're taking a different financial strategy in terms of how we were primarily funding the transformation programme. So, one, we are already investing in revenue services because we're able to, because we've taken a different financial strategy. What we can move on to do is, and I think this is sort of fair to say, and it comes back to, rather not mention him again, but Councillor Howell's point before around delivery, effectively, and what he was unable to deliver when he was in the role of regeneration. What we have now delivered is an urban regeneration company. So that has gone through, that's gone through cabinet now, and that's a significant amount of extra investment, which will allow us, as an authority, for the first time, to have genuine ability to deliver at scale, at pace, place shaping, world-class place shaping schemes. So we needed to do the groundwork. We've done it. We've done it at relatively record pace. And we're going to have one of the best urban regeneration companies and delivery models in the country. Absolutely, we'll be judged on our record of delivery. Everybody is, and I look forward to it. But don't disagree. It's stuff we can invest in, not will invest in, unless there's a good case to do it. But I believe this is a world-class place, and we've now got a plan that enables us to unlock it and to deliver that. And then we've also proven we have the firepower as I believe 12th largest council in the country to deliver that at pace and at scale. So don't reject the question, but that's effectively where our response is. Thank you.
Thank you, leader. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just reading through this MTFP report. I just wanted to raise some concerns around.
So, Councillor Brown, sorry to interrupt, but could you speak up just a little bit?
Okay.
I'm struggling a bit. Thanks.
Okay, it was the points around the assumptions in the report. Paragraph 35 talks about assumptions, and Appendix C lists in quite detailed the sort of key assumptions for the medium-term financial plan. So although the medium-term financial plan figures look reasonable, it does assume a 4.99% council tax increase for 2022-23, which will probably be the highest in the country, and certainly for residents of Poole over a 2-year term would be the highest council tax increase experienced across the country, and so that concerns me. At 35D, it talks about income levels generally returning to pre-COVID levels from 2022-23 onwards, premised on a £12.3 million additional income generation next financial year compared to this financial year. I know it's all crystal ball gazing and it's quite difficult, but I think that will be a stretch. And so it's really just a query about the assumptions, and although this is all crystal ball gazing, we have to have assumptions to underlie the figures that we put into this. I would say, but we do need to make assumptions about future government funding for the local authority, because the government's largesse has got us out of a hole this year, and all local authorities and across the country, they've borrowed hundreds of billions nationally to do it, but that's going to have to come from somewhere in the future. And we've experienced years of austerity with reducing government funding, and I would think that's going to have to, at some point, it's not helpful that the government are only giving us 1 year spending plans. You know, when they finally get around to doing a sort of 3-year comprehensive spending review, I would imagine that's going to have to be a lot tighter than it ever has been in the past. And I don't see any assumptions in here that for the medium-term financial plan that look at the prospect of more restricted government funding in the future years. And I think, you know, we should be considering that because, you know, either the government's got to increase tax levels for all of us, and we've got to all start paying lots more taxes, or they're going to have to cut spending somewhere. So I think we should have somewhere in the assumptions about the government funding levels over the next few years.
I'm sure you can't speak for the government, leader, but maybe you'd like to respond to Councillor Brown's comments.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief, Chair. I think, you know, it's a comment about assumptions, isn't it, effectively, really? And, you know, if you have a financial background, you'll be more comfortable with, you know, making those assumptions. And it's not crystal ball gazing. It is, you know, experience. You know, you're making the best use of the information you've got. And that's effectively what we have done, what I've done, what Adam Richards and his team have done. We just have to look at records. And you talk, you know, I can't not bring you up on the council tax point, because, you know, let's actually look at what we voted for. So we voted for an average of 1.55% council tax rise across the conurbation, and you tried to add an extra % to it. So if you're talking about us putting record levels of council tax, but then your position is to increase it by 1%, it just you know, you're trying to argue two different arguments there. Look, Adam Richards would give a more eloquent answer than this to me, but, you know, effectively this is a very detailed. You've seen the credit our financial team was given in the previous paper, quite rightly. These assumptions are not crystal ball gazing. They're clear, and what we've done by changing our financial strategy materially different from your own one, Councillor Brown, is given us more financial firepower to deal with this. You look at what we've done with the Futures Fund. Do we want to wait for the government to give us money, or do we want to bid for all the money we can bid, but also make sure we've got money to invest ourselves? We are, because of our financial strategy, not yours, in a materially better position to deliver on this budget, and you know, very confident about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, thank you. I noticed, Councillor Rigby, did you indicate just now? No. You didn't. Okay, Councillor Dedman, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, well, I must admit I have no accountancy background, but I do have a caring background, and I'm looking at page 106, 30. The council will seek to maintain appropriate services for the vulnerable. And then I'm a bit concerned when we go back to 23. I can't see it now. Oh, yes, I can. Actually, it's on I, if that's an I. We're going to consider the extent to which assistive technology can improve service delivery and reduce the ongoing costs in adult social care. And I'd really like to stress that with my own background and having been the cabinet member for a while, I do want to stress that there must be no reduction in the services. I'm sure that the leader and Adam will assure me that there won't be. But when you see things like that, assistive technology, I wouldn't like to think that this means we're just going to have no visits, but we're going to have Alexa on the telly. And this is where some things look as though they're going. So I'd like the leader to reassure me that there's nothing wrong with Alexa. Absolutely, don't get me wrong. But I wouldn't like to think that there's any reduction in the services that people treasure, not only with this council, but for the previous councils. So really, that's my question, leader, that bearing in mind those two bits of the statement, can they be put together?
Yeah.
Leader, can you provide the reassurance that Councillor Dedman is after?
It's a very fair question. Happy to provide it. The reassurance. If we just actually look at what we've actually done, you know, we put an extra 30 million of investment into adult social care. This, on top of that, there's an investment into assistive technology. We've got a big plan that talks about building, you know, modern world-class homes. We've got, you know, 40 million pounds going into transformation investment, so we can provide. And the key is, it's about providing better, you know, and if that ends up costing less, that's fine. But all we are doing is investing more. effectively, and it's about better lives. Councillor Dedman will know better than most. And what people most cherish is to be in their own homes. If we can facilitate a way people are in their own homes for longer, then that's a good outcome for them. And if it ends up being less expensive for us going forward, of course, that's a reasonable outcome as well. But the key thing here is how can we, better lives and better aspirations for people that are currently, sometimes in care homes too early when they actually could be, we will not be making, in the materiality of the adult social care budget. We're investing in it, record levels of investment in it, and we're outcomes focused. And we believe parts of assistive technology, parts of modern housing, parts of all of those supported communities enables us to do that better. And again, I think I used the word before, but it's by intervening in the market and not just letting the market dictate to us. So I completely share Councillor Dedman's view on this and comment on this, but hopefully our record levels of investment should give her some comfort in that.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Dedman, you wanted to come back?
Well, only to totally agree with the Leader that people want to stay in their own homes, but when we're talking about consider the extent to which assistive technology can improve service delivery, great. Reduce the ongoing associated costs. That's the bit, Leader, that I was concerned about. And you've reassured me that there will be no reduction in the service, but we are going to reduce the cost, which will be a good trick. And let's hope we can do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dedman. Councillor Allison, I'm aware that Councillor Cox wants to come back. Councillor Allison, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the pay reward scheme in the paper. So figure 3 of the main paper, and there's a few different figures for pay awards and some contingencies. I just wanted to check because I was under the impression that we'd agreed 1.5% had been agreed. So are the contingencies including that up to 1.5%, or were the contingencies in addition to that?
Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So it's in terms of 1.5% is what is in the MTFP. Adam Richards will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe anything has been agreed yet. Something was put to unions recently, and I believe that was rejected. So I believe the 1.5%, and again I could well be wrong on this. Adam will correct me. Is our assumption is what's in the MTFP. Adam?
Yeah, if I can just come in and offer some clarity. In regards to the 2020-21 financial year, the council made a contingency provision of 1% within its overall contingencies as part of the budget. The employers offered 1.5%, and the union's response was to reject that. So at this moment in time, the 2020-21 position is still to be resolved. In regards to the report in front of you, which is the medium-term financial plan, we're reflecting forward and reflecting the fact that we had that 1%, if you like, within the base as part of that process. But actually, if 1.5 is the worst, almost the most optimistic scenario is agreed, then we need to put in that extra 0.5%. And that's what's factored into the medium-term financial plan as a catch-up, and then it's 2% per annum as an assumption going forward.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying desperately not to fall into the same hole that Councillor Hale keeps falling into and being too political. But I do want to come back on the statement that the Leader made in respect of the 1% proposed increase. That was a 1% increase this year and a 1% reduction next year. So actually there was a 0% increase from the Unity Alliance as proposed by the budget, and I wish he wouldn't keep peddling that line, but I'm sure he will carry on as no doubt he will. He does keep using the word investment in every word, every line that you make, and I appreciate you consider it to be some sort of fairy dust that will solve all the problems that we're all going to have. But you've got to stop using it and start doing it. This is what the point I was trying to make earlier is it's not you can carry on talking about it, but you actually got to do it. And I know you have referred a couple of times to a £30 million investment in adult social care. Now, I'm kind of assuming that includes the purchase of a nursing home. Well, if it is a purchase of a nursing home, and correct me if I'm wrong, That's not an investment in adult social care, as far as I'm concerned. That's an investment in property. So we've invested in property, which just happens to be used for adult social care. So please don't refer to £30 million investment in adult social care. If you start with, if you're using £30 million to get some more social workers, that'd be great. I'd thoroughly approve of that, but not to buy a property. That is not an investment in adult social care. That's an investment in a property.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. So is this fairy dust, Leader?
Absolutely not, Chair, and I'm very happy to prove it. Thank you for Councillor Cox for giving me the opportunity to do that. You said that, Councillor Cox, these are problems we're going to have. Well, absolutely not. These are problems we did have and do have. And what we have done is invested in services. So to give you an example, I keep using it, but it's the £1 million Families Fund. This is our children catch-up fund that we were talking about over a year ago, but our children need that your administration didn't do. So you want proof of what we've done, and then we put it in our budget. So effectively, we are investing, and we are proving it effectively. 13 million in adult social care, 7.5 million in children's services, £50 million in infrastructure through the Futures Fund, £10 million in capex for special educational needs provision. What more proof do you want that we are investing it? And on top of that, what are we going to bring forward? A big plan that could unlock over £200 million of investment into assets and properties for our future. So effectively there is significant proof. And then what did we have in terms of also proof? That you led a budget proposal that was supported by most of the Unity Alliance, if not all of it, that wanted to put council tax even further. So you want to spend less and you want to tax more. So yeah, Chair, I'd probably best leave it there. But over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. The members that wish to? No, in that case, I have got a couple myself. Thank you. I've noticed the dedicated school grant somewhere in the text, and please don't ask me to tell you what paragraph it is because I couldn't tell you. But there was a comment that the deficit was escalating at £10 million per annum, but that the council weren't allowed to supplement the budget, and that's because of legislation prevents you from doing that. So my question is, how is this likely to be resolved? Now, I'm assuming that it's just a balance sheet liability as opposed to a real liability, because presumably the government will have to pick up this issue. But the other point is that I didn't think it was escalating at £10 million per annum. I thought that was a cumulative figure. I don't know if anybody can answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to. And it's actually you're right to raise this, because this is a really material potential issue in the budget. Effectively, it is just a balance sheet item at the moment. But then I believe, and Adam will correct me again, but within for the next 3 years. So ultimately, if the government don't come forward in that 3-year period, then it will move from a balance. It has the potential to move from a balance sheet to a revenue position. We feel very much that it won't do, but we've got to be aware of it and prepared for it, which is why we're being prudent. A couple of things we are doing on it. Well, there's 3 things really. One, there's a detailed improvement plan, which is trying to bring that figure down quite materially. We were surprised at how at the scale of the problem when we came into administration. We're also trying to again intervene. I've mentioned it a few times. The £10 million investment in Senco capital provision. We think we can improve that figure by investing in services. And the last thing we're doing is we're using our position as one of the largest authorities in the country to liaise directly with government to make that position clear that they have to solve. Ultimately, it needs to retain a balance sheet problem, and the government need to solve it, which we fully expect them to do. So it is a material problem, Chair. You're right to raise it, and we're well aware of it and trying to reduce it, but also to negotiate with government around that they need to come forward and rectify it quickly.
Okay, but is it a cumulative figure or is it an annual?
Cumulative, Adam.
Yeah, if I can just come in here, Chair, if I can direct you to Appendix B, which is the financial strategy, sections 45 to 50, go through the position in regards to dedicated schools grant and and the reflection that the leaders just added as part of that overall position. Figure 9 sets out actually where we are with regards to current and anticipated annual shortfalls, and what will that happen and the impact that will have on the accumulated deficit?
Thank you. I thought I'd read the report. I've obviously missed that bit, but thanks for the answer. Just one other question, and that's the cap, the cap on exit pay. Now, I understood that the government had introduced a cap on exit pay, but according to this report, that's now been rescinded. And I just wondered what the impact would be on the transformation programme, if any. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It could have a material impact in the transformation programme. Effectively, one of the things we did do, and we have done with the transformation budget, is we've materially increased the amount of redundancy provision. It was only at £6 million, and that was never going to be enough. So it will be a factor. We have responded partly by increasing the redundancy pressure in the budget, and there is an element we must say is also that I think it's over £100,000, isn't it? And and effectively, what level of tier 1 and tier 2 savings do we need to be doing now? Going forward, we should be less exposed to it. But redundancy is a pressure, and it's one of the reasons why we increased the budget we inherited in terms of redundancy provision.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, I think. Councillor Dedman.
Well, I don't know if we've got this far, Chairman, or if we're leaving before I can answer. Have we reached page 127 yet?
Councillor Dedman, you can be on whichever page you wish on this report. Thank you.
It still is on the accounts, and it's figure 10. Budget and MTFP Council priorities. I just don't want to go ahead, but I didn't want you to leave without me asking this. And it's a technical question, clearly. And this particular priorities investments is all about regeneration and officers' bid writing. And then it says, almost at the bottom, Christchurch feasibility study. And I just wondered what is going to be feasible about Christchurch. Can you expand, please?
Yes, Leader.
Thank you very much. And I believe Christchurch is entirely feasible, Councillor Dedman, and very much looking forward to investing in it. So, we have that's effectively for the Christchurch Civic Centre feasibility study in terms of how we can. Again, this is something coming back to Councillor Howe's point in terms of how do we deliver stuff? How do we embed delivery? Well, it's by investing in teams and people to bring schemes forward, and that specifically is around the Christchurch Civic Centre site.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask then, Leader, that we put that in this report, because there might be people in Christchurch just as dim as I am over it.
I certainly wouldn't say that, Councillor Dedman, at all. And for sure we can move that forward in any future iterations of it.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Okay, members, I think we'll draw this debate to a close now. There have been no comments regarding the recommendations to Cabinet. I understand that there were some issues about strategy in the debate, but there's been no hard recommendations to alter those recommendations to Cabinet. So I think we'll just accept the report as it is. There's nothing for us further to say, so we'll move on from that. So thank you for that very much, Leader and Mr. Richards, which brings us to agenda item 7, which is a scrutiny of regeneration, economy and strategic planning related Cabinet reports. And we have the approval of the 5-year rolling BDC, that's the Bournemouth Development Company, business plan. This is going to be introduced by Councillor Broadhead, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Regeneration, Economy and Strategic Planning. That's a very long job title, isn't it? Would you like to introduce your paper, please, Phil?
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. We're here again. This item, the Bournemouth Development Company LLP business plan is a rolling item that gets brought forward to the authority every year for essentially approval. It is a business plan that is developed by the company, and we have 3 boards on the BDC, I think a few of which might be here today, but obviously I'm quite happy to field the questions on their behalf, and that's Councillor Nigel Brooks, Councillor Beverly Dunlop and Councillor Mike Brooks, all of whom, can I say, Chairman, do a really good job, I think, as advocates, both for the council's direction, but also that kind of independent role as members of that board there. Chairman, I'll try and be quite brief because this board report, this business plan doesn't tend to change tremendously throughout the years because it is a rolling plan. But it is always a good opportunity to find out what's going on. There's never very much new in it because it's a combination of looking back over what's happened over the last year and the kind of emerging plans going forward. But again, it's always helpful to have that in one place. Couple of things I think it would be worth drawing out for members, because there's often a lot of confusion about the Bournemouth Development Company, and I would take this opportunity to actually pay respect to the last administration, who had previously had some negative comments to say about the BDC, but when they were in administration kind of carried on the train of what they were doing and actually looked at expanding it into other areas as well. So I think we have a relatively cross-party view on some of the positives of the Bournemouth Development Company. But I would draw members' attention in the covering report to section number 12, which talks about the returns of the local authority, because this is the one that often confuses people. It says in the 5 schemes that delivered to date that the council has enjoyed healthy returns from its participation in the BDC, and above purely regeneration benefits, around 3.6 million of the profit distribution, land payments of 5.2 million, but also retaining a number of the developed assets as well. And of course, we've got the Madeira Road development, Berry Court, St Stephen's, which has just been done. I don't know whether anybody's walked past or driven past or cycled past that development, but it does look really, really good. And it's great to see that as a private rented sector development, that the take-up has been just the same as it has been on many of the other developments there, and I think it's now pretty much fully let. And of course, the Durley Road development that is underway at the moment. So I just thought it's always worth bringing that out, because sometimes if you look at newspaper articles or things, it can look like the BDC is some kind of chronic failure. But actually, it does bring healthy returns in for the council. But of course, this is all about placemaking and regeneration. I think it's also worth, Chairman, taking this opportunity just to talk about the local partnerships independent review that the Chief Executive commissioned, I think, last year. We are due to get that final report any day now, and that I'm hoping to be bringing that forward to the council, probably via cabinet, in September, and that will be an independent view on the success or otherwise of the BDC function. The emerging feedback that we're getting for that is actually really quite positive. The summary seems to be that it continues to offer good value for money. It's delivered positive returns, financial returns, as we've seen in this report, but also crucially, their findings look like they're going to say that it delivers much better quality development than you would see in the private sector. And some of the recommendations that I think are emerging from that as well highlights 2 areas going forward. And it's 2 areas that actually I think we would all agree on and are actually in steps to address. First of all, making sure we've got better in-house skill within the local authority to deal with the council side of that. And that's why I'm really pleased that we've got our interim director of delivery, Dave Anderson, that's joined us recently, as well as the leader pointed out, the huge amount of skill set we're going to be getting through our urban regeneration company, which is now going live. And finally, their recommendations, I believe, will show that we need a bigger solution on the replacement of public parking provision. There's always been a commitment, certainly in the ones that I've been involved in, for replacement of the public parking spaces, and that is highlighted in the business plan. However, due to parts of the area action plan, there's been a policy that it has to be replaced generally on site. Is that the best strategic way forward? If you're looking at replacing public parking, is it not better to look at a more kind of holistic solution? I think the local partnerships report will be bringing that out. I completely agree, and that's where we're looking at a piece of work as well to take that bigger strategic view of public parking. I just thought I'd address that now. Again, I believe that independent and objective report will be coming out in a few months' time, but I thought I would address what I think are the emerging themes from that. Chairman, happy to take any questions. The actual full business plan is there, and as I said, there's not a tremendous amount of difference from what we've seen in the past. It gives a summary of the activity over the last year, in particular the activity around Durley Road, which is going to be nearing completion soon. And again, I think that's looking quite healthy in terms of how that's going along, and also an exploration of the other sites that are in fruition at the moment. In particular, the Winter Gardens, as we know, when I inherited this, they're like many major projects of this scale. There are some viability issues that our new partner that we're working with, which is Muse, which is a different part of the Morgan Sindall group, bringing a lot of skills actually in this area, are working through how we can address those viability issues, primarily through kind of what I call engineering solutions. Are the balconies the right size? How can you save money here, there? But also as an administration, we're taking the opportunity, as the leader has talked about in the MTFP and the financial update, we want to be investing, and I apologise about using that word, Councillor Cox, but I do think it is the right word, investing in assets for our future. We are already have previous cabinet approval to acquire some of the assets from the Winter Gardens. Do we want to go further, particularly in the PRS arena? And also, I think we can and should perhaps go further about some extra public parking provision in there as well. So that's some of the emerging work streams that are happening there. And then finally, the major other project that we've got at the moment, the Cotlands development. We are continuing to push forward, the BDC is continuing to push forward work on that development. But of course, central to this really, really important mixed-use scheme, which is in our central business district of Bournemouth, is quite a quantum of office provision. And we need to make sure in these times post-pandemic, when there is a question mark over of what the office accommodation strategy is going to look like in the future, that we get that right before we take any final decisions there as well. Again, I think Muse are the right partners to be working on that. But again, that's why that hasn't progressed probably as quickly as we would like at this time. But happy to take any further questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Members? Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. You only used investment once, so well done. That's very good, and in the right context as well. I'm gonna have to say I'm not up to speed with the BDC, the Bournemouth Development Company. But one of the crucial questions I'm still asking myself is, why is it still called Bournemouth Development Company? Surely we should be BCP Development Company now. And why is it only restricted to a centre of Bournemouth? Why are we not looking at the whole conurbation as for these opportunities, which is presumably what it's there for, is to look at opportunities. So are we not restricted, because we're 2 years into this now? So are we not looking further? One point I wanted to make was I noticed particularly on Winter Gardens, there's a viability review, which I think is absolutely vital. I was at a meeting the other day in the City of London, and there were property people and telling me that actually the whole property investment market is changed and is changing, because I think the comment was that 20 and 30-year-olds in our day or even younger than us, some of us, didn't spend very much time at home. They used to spend their time out at work or playing, and just use the house, the flat, for a bed. But these days they can't do that, and the whole future of where we're living is changing, particularly for that sector of society of the 20, 30-year-olds. And therefore, where we were building rabbit hutches, to use an expression, for them to live in, we can't do that anymore, and they won't buy them because they're too small. They're too small for what we have, is demanded of them now, but probably undoubtedly what will be demanded of them in the years to come. And so, is there not a fundamental review of our strategy in that respect, not just on Winter Gardens? So I think those are two questions.
Councillor Broadhead, there's a couple of interesting questions there.
Yeah, no, very interesting questions, actually. I'll take the first one first, and because it's a really good strategic question to ask. We've already got a function there within the BDC, which is a development company. So why not take the opportunity to just take that, and if it's working, it's working, and expand it to the other projects that we've got across our area. And it's a good it's a good question to ask, because there is clearly that possibility to do. I mean, the reason it is still called the Bournemouth Development Company is because nobody's tried to change it, and at the moment the option agreement that is now 10 years old only looks within the Bournemouth boundaries, and the idea was to take a lot of land that the previous Bournemouth Council had, predominantly surface car parks, look to redevelop them whilst replacing that public parking at the same time. Now, time has clearly moved on since then, and we've seen some of the successes and some of the plans we've got for the future. I think one of the things that has also changed, and this is certainly my strong view, is that that model of having a 50-50 partnership was born out of a time, and I've said this in previous meetings, where the previous authority was asset rich. We had a lot of land. We were resource poor, certainly both in terms of the number of people, the experience that we had within the authority, but also, frankly, the finances as well. Now, we had an option when we came in October to say, well, do we just take the BDC and just slap everything else into the BDC across the BCP area and just change the name? Or actually, do we want to have more of a mixed model approach? And it was part of the work that we looked at the regeneration options that I presented at Cabinet earlier on this year. The decision that we've taken at the moment is that for the other sites, which total around 2 billion roughly of GDV across BCP, and that's the other sites, that's not including the optioned BDC, Bournemouth Development Company sites, that the best way was to set up our own urban regeneration company. And within that, we haven't decided to partner with anybody else on that. We've got the resources now to be able to fully finance the resource for that in-house, and to bring in that real experience and skill, as I've talked about before, to take forward those sites, whilst, and in a very complementary way, continue the work of the BDC for the sites that they're clearly progressing, and some of them being at quite advanced stages. So it was a tactical decision that we took. We could have continued work with that private sector partner and expanded their remit, but instead we've decided to have a kind of a multimodal approach almost of having different solutions for different problems. If it ain't broke, don't fix it in certain respects with the BDC, although there are clearly improvements that we'll be working on into the future. But actually, we're in a very different place from where the preceding Bournemouth Borough Council was in terms of our future aspirations for the rest of the regeneration projects in the BCP area. With regard to your second question, Councillor Cox, which is about viability, again, you're absolutely right. You've got to do this and you've got to do it properly. This is something that happens with any major regeneration projects. But we're taking a kind of a kind of a multi-approach on this. The BDC itself, led by our private sector partner in that, are doing a really intense and consolidated piece of work on the viability, particularly focused on, as I mentioned before, the kind of more engineering solutions. Now that there's full planning permission there, things change on a daily basis. Building prices, and now that we've got a full contractor on board, they're working through how we can really make sure that the actual physical building and the construction of itself are viable. But that's just one side, as you've said. The second side is what is viable in the future in terms of the development, in terms of what it's going to be used for, what that demand is going to be. And again, we're doing some work both within the BDC, but also with our new resource we've got, both through our Director of Delivery and also the experience we have in the Urban Regeneration Company, to drill down into that part as well. To first of all, making sure that the viability assessments of the BDC stack up, but also to look at, do we want to go any further? What is the future looking like? And I mentioned earlier on that we're exploring the possibility, for instance, of making more of the residential units available for the private rented sector, because we've seen the incredible demand that there is in that sector, both for the developments that we progressed by and large through the Bournemouth Development Company, Bury Court, St Stephen's Road, and how successful they've been, but also a lot of the private sector developments in the private rented sector, which clearly show that there's a continued demand in that area. And that's because, precisely as the point you make, Councillor Cox, that is what a lot of the younger people in particular want, or rather can facilitate. So again, that actually helps us in terms of viability, both in terms of funding, but also making sure that we're actually building something which is the right thing, not just for our regeneration options, but for housing people in the correct way, particularly where there's residential elements. But so a lot of work going on in that area, and I think we'll have some finality of that position again by the end of the summer.
Thank you. Okay, members. Okay, we've got. I think Councillor Dedman, you were first, and then Councillor Rigby, and then Councillor Howell. Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Chairman. It was only a question about this item 7, purpose of the BDC. I've listened obviously to all that Councillor Broadhead has said, but I just want to, and I don't know if he has addressed this or if I've missed something, missed one of the memos we've all been sent out about everything. The decision to add sites is one for the 2 members of BDC to determine based on the process set out in the legal agreements and will be the subject of a future Cabinet report. Now, this Cabinet report is what Councillor Broadhead mentioned, which is coming up. But, and I don't know, Councillor Broadhead, if you have addressed this, but what happens if the decision is not to add sites and then BDC builds out whatever they've got? What do we do then? I mean, is that the end of that, or should I wait for the report in September?
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think there's 2 points there. First of all, as it mentions in that, there is the option of adding further sites if we want to, and therefore, like anything, you need Cabinet approval for that. A prime example, the previous administration were considering adding a site in Poole to the option agreement and doing some exploration of that, and came forward with some initial work on that. It was quite an interesting looking development, actually. We're looking at that and again deciding whether that is something that we should be trying to progress via the BDC or via our new urban regeneration company, because we now have probably an even better route to deliver that than through the BDC. And that would, of course, as it says there, be subject to a future Cabinet report. Anything else, let's say the status quo was maintained and we just carried on with the option agreement, carried on with the number of sites coming through one by one as they come to fruition. Already we're in a position that any decision on those have to be Cabinet and full Council, I believe, approval anyway, because they deal with the transfer of land. Because to be very clear, the transfer of land doesn't happen to the BDC, to that function, until almost the very last thing, and that does need full Council approval. So I think the point is, if we decide not to progress and add any further sites to it, we probably don't need a Cabinet paper to address the sites issue, but we will need further Cabinet and full Council approval for any of the sites coming forward individually, whether they're in the option agreement or not, for approval, just because that's how it works. I think that answers the question.
No, it absolutely doesn't answer my question, because my question wasn't about who holds the land until the option is taken up. It was if the Council does not give BDC any more sites to work on, then what happens to the company? Because we will be running something else alongside. It's that really. Gotcha. And that's probably a legal thing which has to be addressed somewhere else, maybe.
Gotcha. No, I get the question now. So I think to kind of paraphrase your question is, if we decided we didn't want to do it anymore, what happens? And it's a good question. I believe it is addressed within the business plan itself. Towards the back of the actual business plan, it talks essentially about how we wind the company down. So if we actually said as under item 6 in the actual business plan, which is the exit strategy. So if we took the decision, so at the moment, I think that the thrust seems to be, we've got some work that's going through the BDC, we're progressing that, we're also setting up our urban regeneration company, which is looking at the non-BDC sites. If at some stage of the future we change track on that and decided actually, let's just scrap the BDC altogether, roll it all into the urban regeneration company, that's not my direction of travel at the moment, but it's a legitimate option that we could pursue, then there is a provision within the option agreement as developed through the BDC, essentially to wind the company down. And of course, that would need a council approval.
Yes, thank you, that's fine.
Thank you. I think it was Councillor Rigby next, was it? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Getting into the business plan part of it, I just want to skip down to sustainability, which is on page 169. It's, excuse me, it's just really quite weak, to be honest. It's less of a question here, more of a comment. I know this is just a business plan, and I know it's not a sustainability statement as such, but I think within this business plan, this doesn't meet our statements as BCP Council towards what we're doing towards sustainability. And I don't even think it really matches Morgan Sindall's, to be honest with you, having worked with them on projects in my private job in the past. What I want to see in this is just a bit more flesh put on it. All it really speaks about is employing locally, which is great. The supply chain bit, achieving sustainable build. It'd be nice to see something about aiming towards BREEAM excellent targets. See if I can get to the end of this. See beating BREEAM excellent targets, meeting what our ambitions are as BCP Council moving forward with sustainability. I mean, if you look outside of BDC, what we're doing with the Daily Innovation Hub and the design down there is really forward thinking with the green roofs. I think it's got water recycling and grey water, things like that. It'd be nice to see those sort of commitments brought into BDC's future development plans. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, look, I mean, Councillor said it was more of a comment than a question, so I don't need to respond, but I will. I think he's right. It's always difficult with strategy documents and business plans because if you go too far, then it's like almost like an operational manual, and if you don't go far enough, then the criticism, understandably, is well, actually, you don't really mean anything. I think clearly there are improvements that we can do in a number of areas on the sustainability agenda. Interestingly, I'm having a lot of conversations at the moment around our other regeneration vehicle, the Urban Regeneration Company that we will fully own, about absolutely embedding both sustainability and design principles, which I think is important, right at the centre of what we do there. So we've got an opportunity there because we're creating it from new. Clearly, as time moves on, the business plan and the kind of the focus of the BDC will need to adapt. Actually, the chairman, Councillor Barnett, and I were chatting about this last week about the kind of different flavour of the business plan because it makes a lot more reference to our big plan, which is completely correct. This is a company which is half owned by the council, half owned by Morgan Sindall and Muse, and because we're 50% of it, and because we're the driver of the kind of the placemaking and the strategy side, of course it can and should reflect our changing direction through the big plan. And I think that's equally true of the sustainability stuff as well. So I think it's pretty much on a project by project basis that we tend to drill into it. But I accept the point that we might well need to go a bit further about embedding the principle in.
Okay, Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously, having previously brought a previous version of this document to this committee, I'm aware of the nature of it and how it rolls forward and gradually changes, and inevitably doesn't give a great amount of detailed information. I must say I am concerned about the viability issues that have been raised with regard to Cotlands and particularly Winter Gardens. Those are the really big projects that the BDC is currently pursuing, and not to be able to deliver them would really, it must bring into question the viability of the partnership itself. But I think more importantly, we as Councillor Cox said, we've really got to get to grips with what is the market that we are catering for in the future. And I think in the past, there's been a kind of assumption that it doesn't really matter build, because as long as we can sell it, then the council's going to make some profit, we'll get some placemaking out of it, and it will improve, in the Winter Gardens, the town centre. If it turns out that there has been a fundamental shift and the kind of people that we were expecting to buy those type of properties actually want some outside space, actually are prepared to compromise on the town centre location to move further outside and get that additional space, that really does bring into question not just Winter Gardens, but regeneration in Poole, regeneration across the whole area. And I accept that you mentioned in terms of the URC that you're looking at design principles and sustainability. So perhaps you're already looking at those issues with regard to the remit of that organisation. But I really think, it's such an important issue that perhaps it's something that this committee should be looking at. Certainly, it should be a subject of a member briefing or workshop, I think, because if that market has disappeared, then what are we going to do? And there's already an argument. Many of us would say that we should be more actively trying to deliver housing for local people rather than the people moving into the area. But we also are very short of people who work in key sectors who can, think of this to be a wonderful place to live. But most of us own our own houses who think that probably if you're looking to move into the area and you have a choice about how much money you spend on your accommodation, you might choose to spend that money in different ways and go to somewhere cheaper. Thank you.
I'm not sure there's any questions in.
Well, I can't just summarise. I mean, I think that the question is, is there going to be a really detailed study on the change of market conditions in terms of viability and who we're marketing to? And the second point was, are we going to get member involvement in some way across parties, so that as a councillor body we really understand these issues? Thank you.
The very nature, of course, of the sites that come up for development is that they do have to be approved through the normal council system, and the viability issues associated with them are always considered. But whether there is a point about an overall strategy because of changes in the market, I guess that is something that would that probably needs consideration. Let Councillor Broadhead reply.
Yeah, no, I think that it's a valid point that's going to be made. I mean, this paper and this session isn't about our urban regeneration company, but certainly it's my intention now that it's kind of formally up and running, that we will want member involvement in terms of some of the principles around that, and that includes a look at what we're terming viability, but really it's just about making sure that we're building the right things for the right people in the right places that is kind of strategically important for the regeneration of our towns. And we've got a super opportunity through that to be able to do it. With regard to the BDC, as you pointed out, Chair, I mean, this happens on every individual project. It has to go through planning permission. Just to be really clear, because Councillor Howell referenced viability concerns in both the Cotlands development and the Winter Gardens development. Cotlands development isn't so much about viability, it's about that exact point that we just talked about, making sure that we're actually going to be delivering the right thing. And when you have the quantum of office space you have that we're proposing in that development, of course it would absolutely be just completely not the wrong thing to steam through that in the middle of a global pandemic where there's a question mark over how we work in the future. So I think, we can all understand why that hasn't just steamrolled through, and I think that's the right thing to do. It's not so much about the financial viability issues, it's about probably that exact point about that capacity for that particular part. With regard to the Winter Gardens, the viability and the financial viability that we're talking about here is, as I understand it, exactly the same as what I inherited. So when I came in October, we had that viability study that was either done or just been done or was around that time. The finances of that have not changed at all. What we've been doing is working through how we can then make that work, both in terms of, as I said, the kind of engineering solution, but also taking that opportunity to, again, do that precise point that you've raised, which is to make sure that actually these are the right things for this area. I don't really accept the point that Councillor Howell made, that the whole exercise of these regeneration projects is just to get a crane in the sky and get something built and then just put the badge on that and said that's regeneration. Certainly not how the projects have been taken forward in the past, and it's certainly not how I envision all the projects across the BCP being taken forward in the future. Hence the exact reason that rather than do them in a piecemeal approach that has been done before, we've created the Urban Regeneration Company so that we can have a real strategic chess piece view of where are the right things that we want to do using all of the assets that we've got. But yes, I will commit that there will be some pretty deep member involvement in that. And once we've got a settled team for the URC, I think it would really be worth them coming to meet members on a member seminar and talk about some of those principles that we're discussing.
Yeah, I thought you were beckoning me in. So, yeah, in terms of where Winton Gardens is, I mean, I quite believe it is in a very similar state to when I left it, but it is the issue there was that costs were increasing at a greater rate than the ability to increase the price of the property. And therefore, there was certainly, as explained by BDC and the Morgan Sindel element of it, and therefore there was an incentive to act as quickly as possible, essentially, to start building, because of that gap that was increasing. But I can also quite believe that Muse, being a larger organisation with more capacity, has the ability to find cost savings as well. So yeah, but the second point is that it's all right to talk about sustainability, but there's a tendency to look at that in a narrow accounting way, numbers on a page. And what I'm talking about here is sustainability in terms of the future market. And I don't think developers are very good at looking forward and looking at changes to the market. They tend to like to repeat models that they've used elsewhere. And the model for years and years has largely been targeting groups of people that can access finance, and a lot larger, particularly in the private sector, second home owners, holiday lets, people retiring into the area, none of which really help us as a council to deal with the issues in terms of housing in our local area, or indeed, and there's adult social care issues as well, aren't there? So what I was asking for, and I think hopefully what the portfolio holder was suggesting might happen, is that we as a council body have access to a discussion and briefing from people who really understand these dynamics that are in place now, and there must be forward-thinking people who are across all the data who are plugged into that, and I think we need to hear from them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure did you want to come back on that, Councillor Broad? Okay, Councillor Slade.
Thank you very much. I have one simple question and two small comments. My question, so I'm going to get the comments out first. This is just for you to write down, Phil. Apparently, the sign advertising people to go to the Durley Road car park is still up, and people were trying to park somewhere where there is currently a building site, so that might need to be addressed. The second thing is, in the paper and the sustainability section, it talks about carbon omissions, not carbon emissions. That probably also needs to be addressed. But the point I actually wanted to make was, last year, well, the year before last, when myself, Councillor Howell and Councillor Beasley were on the Seascape board, we completely transformed the way that business plan looked. And what's this business plan is it looks like the old business plan for Seascape. In other words, an annual update that's not really a business plan. And I wonder whether there is, whether you would consider working with the team to actually produce next time something that's more akin to a business plan. It just doesn't feel that it's doing the job at the moment. So I'm just happy to leave that with you for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I've also got a simple question for you, Phil. The Town Hall Annex whilst yes, it is a car park, mainly for the staff, it isn't the same as all the other car parks that have been on the BDC before. So we have a lot of staff that work in there. So my question really is, where are we going to put them all? Because if we're changing Poole and Christchurch civic centres as well, we've still got a lot of staff, and I'm sure they don't all want to work from home or can't work from home. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen to them if we do redevelop the town hall annex.
Mr. Broadhead?
Yeah, no, really good point. I mean, in the business plan itself, there's a section on key targets for 2021, and members will note that under the Town Hall Annex section, it tells you kind of as basically what comes next. Target 1 is for the council to conclude its estate review, because we can only release this asset, either for development or otherwise, if it isn't actually needed anymore. And of course, that's pretty key and central to our transformation agenda. Now, I don't know what the outcome of that is. The leaders taking that project forward and you know, doing a really good job on it. Clearly, there's been some assistance within that piece of work due to the pandemic and the clear utility of being able to work from home for a lot of people. So that will have some really positive impacts on how that transformation agenda goes forward. But as Councillor Edwards has pointed out, you know, we're also consolidating our portfolio, our asset portfolio, and we have centred around the town centre site in the Bournemouth campus, for want of a better term, to be the main one for the future. So that's a separate piece of work, and I think you're right to raise it. One thing I can say is that we won't be developing this unless all of those bits have been answered. So there's absolutely no way that we're going to be developing this just because it's there, and then we're left in a position where we haven't got enough workspaces, people can't get to work because there's not enough parking, or we haven't got another way of trying to get people around their different locations. So that's really why that one hasn't progressed yet, because it's very much dependent on the outcome of the estate strategy within the transformation agenda.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, the whole issue about what to build, where to build, how to build is a very interesting area. And we're seeing a lot of changes in the market that are quite fundamental, not least of which people moving out of urban environments for greener space. It does seem to me that we do need a fundamental review of where we're going. If we look at it in basics, there's two levels we need to build for. One is the local economy and residences we need to support, and the other one is what sort of economy do we want to attract, and how do we seek to satisfy it? What's tomorrow's business? And they actually could be quite different things. And I think that's why I would ask for a fundamental review at some stage, because I think in simple terms, what we're doing at the moment in a number of areas is we're building against what we think we need or know, as opposed to what we need to know. So I would recommend that as we move forward, we do have a very, very solid review of where we're going, what our objectives are, and how we're going to deliver it. Because if we get housing and infrastructure wrong, it all collapses. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And I think we're probably talking about the Urban Regeneration Company here and what that's been set up to. Councillor Broadhead is shaking his head, disagrees. Go on.
Because it affects this as well, doesn't it? So I think Councillor O'Neill's point is, you know, if you are a 50% member of an Urban Regeneration Company of which this is one, and you're building things that aren't fit for the future, then you have a responsibility, and you should be getting that right. I think it does work both ways, though, in that we can make assumptions on these things as well. So, I mean, I know, Tony, you made the point that people are moving out of our urban centres. They want more open spaces. Some people are, other people aren't. And actually, there is a flock, particularly of the younger people, who precisely want to be in the urban centres. And actually, by and large, you know, and I hate to bring it up, but when we have housing targets that we do as well, equally, if we want to protect our open spaces, then we're going to need to have people more living in the urban centres. That would be wrong if we were going against the grain of travel, but I don't think we are. So I think you raise a point. We need some deeper analysis on that, as you said, Chair, part of that will be through the Urban Regeneration Company. But do remember, the Urban Regeneration Company's remit is not just to take the 16 projects that we've got outside the BDC agreement and develop them. It is essentially almost our one-stop shop of strategic skill within the regeneration area. And they can and will be used to help feed into a lot of the kind of council side of the BDC as well. So yeah, we do need to do some more work on that area. But actually, the market tells you, and you look at what the market is doing around the country. Look at what the market is doing in terms of the housing market in Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole at the moment. And I'd slightly challenge the idea that people are flocking out into the middle of the countryside.
Sorry, what was that last? Sorry, I didn't quite catch that last sentence.
I'd just say, if you look at the level of demand we've got in the cross conurbation at the moment, I think the idea that people don't want to be within our more urban areas is not really what we're seeing. But again, we've got to do some more work on this going forward.
Thank you, Chairman. The point was not that they're not seeking to be necessary in urban areas, but if in urban areas they have some access to reasonable, either immediate or locally, outside space.
Absolutely.
Okay, is there anybody else? Okay, I've got a couple of questions for you. That's a Broadhead. Yeah, first of all, I take up on what Councillor Slade said about the business plan. It didn't seem so much of a business plan to me as a bit of a lobbying exercise for some of the things that would influence council strategy. It seemed to be more of a marketing opportunity than a business plan. But having said that, it is what it is. I just wondered who actually wrote it. Did Muse write this business plan? Do you know who the author was? It doesn't say on the report itself. Is it a combined effort between council officers and Muse, or is it produced by Muse themselves?
Yeah. Thank you. The actual cabinet paper itself is written by Martin Tiffin with help from Adam Richards, as it says on the report. The business plan itself comes from the BDC. So that's why, I've talked about this before. It's a slightly unusual one because I can present the cabinet paper which talks about the business plan. The business plan is BDC's creation with input from our board members and both the council side and the Muse side, and then comes essentially to the council for our approval.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it talks a lot about the parking issues in the town and how the strategy needs to be agreed with the council. And there is a paper coming up in the future to actually discuss that. It's not on the cabinet plan, incidentally, Councillor Broadhead. So if there is a plan to put that in front, I'd appreciate it if it could go on the cabinet plan so we can have full warning for it. But it does seem to me that, in terms of parking strategy, this is driven by the local plan. This isn't driven by the BDC. It's the local plan to decide what the council should be doing in terms of its parking strategy. But there seems to be a bit of a lobbying going on from within the BDC about what the council should be doing. How would you respond to that assertion?
Yeah, I don't disagree. Now, I think the question is whether you view that as a negative thing or a positive thing, if I may, Chair, because we have here, this is separate from the local authority. We are a 50-50 holder in this, but we have to react to what we're being told. And if maybe it is more the Muse side than it is the council side, or maybe it's a consolidated view of the board members and Muse when they've got their hats on sat over there. You'd have to ask the board members themselves. But if there is a drive that no, actually we really do need X, Y, and Z to help us take it forward, then I do think that, of course, side conversations help with that, but it should present itself in a more formal environment so that we can actually listen to what they're actually looking for. I think by and large you're right in terms of the parking situation being addressed through the local plan, although as we know it's predominantly the area action plan that dictates a lot of the current policy within the Bournemouth town centre area. So it is not just the local plan that can that is the only tool that we have to look at a more consolidated strategy. I don't believe the current policy that we have within that the BDC is working to of maintaining that 6,400 public parking spaces is something that came out of the previous local plan. I believe that was a town centre area action plan that put that in place. So we have lots of different tools, but I'd prefer to hear from them. So I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing that they're pitching for what they think is strategically important going forward. I quite welcome it.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you look at the number of sites that are in the plan, it occurred to me, how does the council prioritise what it wants and where it wants it? Just for example, the Durley Road development that's now gone ahead has left a bit of a parking problem in that area. Yet West Hill car park is one of the development sites within the BDC. And it occurred to me that, having removed the car park, wouldn't it have been sensible to then replace that parking or add to the parking, which is part of the council policy under the local plan? Wouldn't it have been made sense to just go ahead with that development? And I don't see any progress in that area at all. And just as a general question, how does the BDC prioritise the sites that it's actually developing? What is it that decides? Who decides?
Well, and this is the point. It's a joint approach, isn't it? So essentially, each party has a kind of a veto on the ultimate direction, but you do these things better by collaboration. I mean, ultimately, everything that we do through the BDC, as we explored earlier, has to be approved by Cabinet and full council. So, it was the previous administration. I'm not trying to be political. It's just a matter of fact that approved the Durley Road going ahead without the re-provision of public parking. A number of us voted against that. I think what I don't want to do, and what I don't think is wise to do, is stumble into a piecemeal approach in the future, which is why you'll see riddled within the BDC business plan, which I actually agree with, that we do need a bigger answer on that public parking issue so that we can have that slightly more strategic approach. I've been sat in conversations in the past about some of the smaller developments where you're just trying to arbitrarily engineer a certain number of parking spaces within public parking spaces within a development because we have this re-provision essentially, on site. And that's just bonkers. We should have a much more strategic view of this. I think that needs to happen. Muse, as a new partner, have come in and have said quite clearly, we really think this needs to happen. As a local authority, I think we would all agree that needs to happen. So I think that will come next. I wouldn't be surprised, as I said earlier on, if that wasn't one of the key findings of the local partnerships review as well. So the time is right to do that. We've got the new partner in Muse to be able to do that. Once we've got Winter Gardens done, Cotlands kind of sits on its own anyway. So the rest of the sites were probably that good strategic opportunity to go, right, actually, let's think of a more, a much deeper parking solution. But it has to be driven by both of us together, otherwise it won't happen. But ultimately, council have to approve everything that they do.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I mean, the BDC is a very interesting model, but of course it was set up 10 years ago, and it effectively assigned some of the most prime development sites across Bournemouth for the next 20 years. And it will now have to presumably complete that particular run because that's what the agreement says. But as we've seen, huge changes are occurring. Not least through the pandemic, and now the probably investor sentiment in particular for developments like the Winter Garden. And it's not surprising that the council is looking for alternative models, for example, for the Urban Regeneration Company. And of course, that BDC probably will play a part within the overall picture there, and I understand that. I guess I was slightly worried to see, given the the difficulties of having a long-term agreement like that and seeing the effect that's now having, why we would want to be adding more sites into that particular agreement, and in particular the one that's now in the plan or listed in the plan for Poole, which is actually outside of the agreement that was originally set up. And I'm wondering who has authorised that to now form part of the BDC business plan, because actually it's not even something that's been approved by council or anybody else as far as I'm concerned or I'm aware of. So I don't know if you want to just comment on that.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, first of all, that I just for clarity, that the first point about that the idea that we're bound into this and we have to deliver everything that's in the option agreement is it's just not how the BDC functions. And we've talked about earlier in the meeting the exit strategy that we have. We're not bound to build all of them out. Ultimately we can decide not to do any of them. We can decide to do one or two more. We can decide and make that decision to expand outside of and add further ones into the option agreement. I think I've kind of hinted earlier on my view on that. I know the previous administration explored the Chapel Lane development in Poole. There was some early work done on it. I don't really see within this business plan that being so explicit that can and will take place in the future. I think we've got a strategic decision to take as an authority about whether we want to do that or whether we want to pursue that through our urban regeneration company or sell it or not do anything with it. So I don't feel, my understanding is we haven't committed to that at any stage. And actually, if you look under 3.11 in the business plan and the key milestones for 2021, it's not in there. So I know that there were a number of reasons, to be fair, that the previous administration looked at pursuing that, not least around there was some legal ambiguity about whether you could do that. So I think it was a test of actual making sure whether that the ability to add things into the option agreement outside of the geographical area was possible. But my understanding is that we haven't formally committed to that. And again, my strong thrust is if we've got the urban regeneration company there, that would probably be the one that you'd naturally fall to give you the advice on how to take that forward. Their advice might be progress through the Bournemouth Development Company.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I guess my concern here is that, if we say this business plan is okay and it goes to cabinet, say it's okay, de facto, do accept the point that there was a caveat in the business plan saying, that there are some issues about including it in there.
It just says amalgamating the site, I think, in the business plan, which is a continuation of what's already been done for the Chapel Lane one. So I don't think it commits us in any shape or fashion.
Just changing the subject slightly. I mean, the Winter Gardens development is a hugely important development. Because of the current situation in the market generally, is there a nervousness over the financing of the development? Because one senses that there clearly will be, and we're reading all the time that the cost of building is going up hugely. I mean, I think last time we looked at all the figures, the viability issues were such that the land value was going to be zero on transfer, and that was all driven by viability and residual land value. And that pressure is increasing because of building costs. And I'm just wondering, can you give us a flavour for what's happening in the market in terms of finance, the ability to finance this development, and the Cotlands Road as well, to be fair?
Well, there's a number of options within there, aren't there? So there's obviously the private sector finance. There's whether Morgan Sindel Group want to get involved with the finances, and equally there's the possibility of the council taking a more proactive role as well. All of which are being explored through the twin track mechanism I mentioned of viability, with BDC doing a piece of work over here, and then our own minds that we now have on this, both double checking that and also looking at other ways that we can address this further. So I think it's best that we wait until those pieces of work come out. I don't want to jump to any conclusions of there. I think I've trying to be subtle. I certainly wouldn't have any aversion to a greater number of private rented sector units in the development, because A, it seems that that's what the market demands, B, I'm, along with the leader, very, very keen on expanding the asset base from the local authority for the future. And also that helps to address those viability issues. So that's one of the bits that we will be looking at. And equally, there's all sorts of other ways. There's some interest in a number of the commercial units. Quite often they can be wrapped up as an investment opportunity, and we've been working with government previously about the using the Department for International Trade to talk about the investment opportunities there. But there's so many different ways you can cut it. I think the first step is that engineering solution. So let's get the experts to come back and give some final situation on, if you build it out with minor tweaks or as is, based on what we think is the market wants right now, how much further have Muse got forward at addressing that viability gap? And then from there on in, we can look at all of those other things. And I believe we're scheduling September to have some conclusions on those decisions.
Okay, thanks. One last one, if you don't mind, and that's about affordable housing. Now, buried deep in one of the annexes, I saw that the BDC has made contributions to affordable housing, and I'm not actually aware of any, but then I don't have detailed knowledge of all the developments or planning consents. But are you aware of any affordable housing contributions? And
myself, off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure of the specifics on that. So either if there's any officers on the call that might be able to give you the kind of on the ground view of that now. If not, Chair, I can commit to come back with the answer on that.
Okay, again, it's one of the sort of marketing type things that's there that says that we make contributions to affordable housing, and I'm not aware of any. If there is an officer there that can answer that question, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm not entirely sure whether the.
All right, it's Chris. I just thought I'd come in, so I'm on the call, but I don't have an answer for you, so it might be best for us to respond accordingly, as Phil said.
Okay, thank you. All right then, members, anybody else? Councillor Howe.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back on your point about car parking, actually. With regard to Durley Road, there was a plan. It was determined that West Hill and Avenue was sufficient to cater for the loss of the car parking associated with the site. The planning committee accepted that as well. Obviously, that was worth consideration in the planning commission. So I think in terms of more broadly about parking, there's a real discussion. We have 6,000 spaces in Bournemouth, apparently, and pretty much we only use 4,000 of them, except on exceptional, really high visitor times, like we're experiencing at the moment, or at the Air Festival. And there's to be a real question about whether it's worth allocating resource in that way. I mean, personally, I think we tourism, the amount of concentration that we put towards tourism is actually a negative thing, because it takes resources away from the broader economy, and it restricts our ability to become a more rounded city-like place. It sustains people in low-paid jobs, etc., and creates a lot we won't address, but I think it is an issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Campbell. I would actually probably disagree with an awful lot of what you just said, but just a point of correction, the planning board did not approve. It was approved on appeal. It was turned down twice by the planning board. The other issues you raise actually aren't relevant to this particular paper, so I guess we'll call that close, or we'll agree to disagree and talk about that another day. Members? Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'll draw that one to a close. Interest in BDC, very topical subject, I'm sure. But we shouldn't forget, I guess, that there have been some really good developments that have come out of the BDC, and there are definitely improvements to the Bournemouth town centre as a result of it. So, there are definitely pluses there that we have to remember. So with that, I think we'll thank you, Councillor Broadhead, and sorry.
There was a separate report here on the high streets excuse at all in the appendices, which seems to suggest that they were part of it.
Yeah, it's the next.
Sorry, I've seen the council.
Yeah. Yes, it is, I think. Yeah. Okay, so we finished about the BDC, and now we'll move on to the next item, which is the High Street strategy. And I hope everybody's had plenty of time to read the thousands and thousands of words that there were attached to the report. Information only report, I understand, Councillor Broadhead. I promise you I read every single word.
I will. There'll be a pop quiz later, Chairman. But yes, it very much is, and I won't spend too long on this because I could wax lyrical about both all of the work we're doing on the high streets across the BCP area, but also what the others are doing as well, and how important this is for the future. And we brought this paper forward because we're really deep in a number of different ways looking at the high street strategies moving forward. It's not just one strategy, there's lots of things we're doing. But as you correctly identified, there's quite a lot of work going on, and I thought it would be a good place to talk about both some of the successes, some of the feedback we're getting, to get feedback from Overview and Scrutiny about areas that they think are important going forward as well. In particular, and you made reference to the appendices of this report, we've got a number which show the work that we're doing, first of all, about listening. So we've got the High Streets consultation report. We did a quite an informal exercise earlier on in the year using some of the new really interesting digital tools that we've got in the council called a platform called Engagement HQ, which gives us the ability to say, we've got 19 high streets, give us your ideas about on the ground, drop a pin where you think different ideas can and should come through. And that was a kind of a test of that software. I was really keen that we start doing a lot more of this, much less formal and much more interactive and topical consultation with people, because I think consultation sometimes is a bit of a dirty word and can be ultra formalized. And I was really pleased with the feedback that we got from that, and some of the really interesting and innovative ideas that came through from it too. We also have some reports back from the business improvement districts within that, because we've talked in previous meetings of the Overview and Scrutiny Board of the need to hear a little bit more from our business improvement districts, what they're up to. We've been working really closely lately with them, particularly around the greener, cleaner, safer agenda that we've got about making sure our various town centres and high streets actually become places that people want to be. And within their reports, they highlight some of the joint working that we've been doing within that. But also within the grant programmes that we've been doing, both directly with the business improvement districts and also with organisations and businesses across the conurbation. Some of the really innovative proposals that are coming forward from the grant funding that we provided. And to give you an idea, and I think it's worth highlighting this, but I think by within the next month or so, we will have issued almost £100 million of grant to businesses and organisations across the BCP area, and that's since October. And that's not counting the grants that happened under the first lockdown. Certainly over 75 million of grants at the current count. And some of the proposals, particularly through the bids, but also through the Bounce Back Challenge Fund that we did, are now coming to fruition. We've also included in the appendix the final work that we've been doing of the future of urban cities, future of urban centres as part of our status of the Key Cities group. And I've taken the lead on the national piece of work that we've been doing that. That's been getting some national traction as well, particularly around our ask, and the leader was talking a little bit more about it earlier, around the real future autonomy that we think that local authorities should have around borrowing, not just relying on government grants. And a first step within that has been our Futures Fund, which has been getting some national recognition, and also the Smart Cities work that we're doing as well. So that was the aim of bringing this forward. A couple of things that I politely request, it'd be really interesting to get some feedback. Areas that the board think we may wish to drill down further into as we do the work on the high streets going forward. I thought that informal consultation was really interesting for a number of areas. The executive summary is very helpful if you don't want to read the whole thing, because it breaks down the themes that are coming through within the different high streets. So taking pool, a big push for more outdoor space, seatings for cafes, bar, restaurants. We're already seeing that coming through. It's really bustling at the moment, but clearly people want to see more. They want more farmers markets, food hall, pop-up events and everything. And again, Councillor Dunlop is leading on the Festival Coast Live programme, but we're also funding a number of events through the Bounce Back Challenge Fund to both the bids and a number of external organisations. Within Bournemouth, talking about rejuvenating our empty, underused and derelict buildings, and we're already seeing what's coming through with the regeneration of Bobby's. There's a pre-application in for the Beals building at the moment. And then going to our slightly smaller town centre, high streets, Broadstone bringing forward ideas about how they can improve the roads, a toast rack as we call there. And I've had 3 meetings recently with the representatives from the Broadstone area, because they have the ability to use their own SIL funding, and we're working collaboratively about how we can help them unlock that funding going forward. What's even also very interesting is where we didn't hear from. And actually, you know, we've got 19 high streets as we've explored. We've received hundreds, if not thousands of comments in some areas, but we didn't receive for the areas of Charminster and Hamworthy. And I just think that's really interesting, because Charminster is a, you know, really good sized high street, and yet nobody put one comment, either positive or negative, about that high street. So what does that mean? You know, worth exploring. But a lot of work going on. Happy to take any questions. This is not the strategy. This is just an update on how things are going and some of the work that's been going on. But there's so much exciting things happening that I thought it would be great to put this out in the public domain so people could see what was going on.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I get the impression, Chairman, that you didn't read every comment, and I actually did read every comment. And to be quite honest, Councillor Broadhead, I found it a little bit depressing, having done this piece of work with other councils, and obviously Christchurch Council. We did all this back in the day, and the wants are always exactly the same. And you do that, and then people sort of say, well, we still want something different. For example, in the Christchurch element, and I noticed we didn't get many responses, I'll go on to that later, they talk about the Mayor's Parlour, and actually the things that they want outside the Mayor's Parlour are there, i.e. a planter, yes, we got one, and a notice board, yeah, we got one. So it sort of makes you wonder if, you know, quite what the feeling is outside. One of the main things, though, Phil, on a more serious note, is that in D, where you want the committee to note that this report is an update on the activity happening on the ground at present, which I understand, yes, and a full strategy and action plan will be delivered in the future. Further up, you've got encourages further collaboration between all those with an interest, and supporting the work of partner organisations. Now in Christchurch, and I am only speaking for Christchurch here, our bid has not got off the ground for various reasons to do with COVID. And I'm sure it will, because the bids always do. But collaborating with partners, are we going to see collaboration with our reasonably newly formed but very strong town council? And I would like that sort of one of the things to be put forward, that the report will count as a collaborator in this strategy and action plan, the town councils as well as the residents. The residents are spoken for often by the town council. So really that was the question, Councillor Broadhead, if, you know, who is going to be consulted in the next tranche? And in fact, when is that going to be in the future, strategy and action plan? Thanks, Chairman.
Councillor Broadhead. Yeah, and that's a point. That's another thing. I haven't seen it on the Cabinet Forward Plan, I don't think.
No, I think just on that point, first of all, as I kind of intimated earlier, that there will be probably a number of different things that we will be doing that will fall under the High Street strategy. I don't think we've quite bottomed out yet whether I'm going to be bringing back the big panacea paper about here's our High Street strategy, ta-da. But ultimately, we have delegated a responsibility to deliver it and to get on with it, which is a reference in the first paper that I brought forward on this area. But I actually envision that we will probably see a number of iterations coming forward, because there isn't just one answer. There are 19 different high streets, there's 19 different solutions. There will be themes that will be coming forward, but yes, the work is clearly going on that. Just to answer Councillor Dedman's questions directly. First of all, I'm pleased to hear her reference the hopeful emerging bid in the Christchurch area. I've certainly been working very closely with their steering group. It looks hopefully that we're going to go to ballot on that, I think in September, which is very positive, and I believe that they're getting a very positive feel on the ground. I think the fact that the Poole town centre bid just recently got reballoted and another mandate to carry on in the future with really healthy margin signals that most levy payers see the benefits of the bids going forward. And again, that's why I was really keen for them to have a platform to be able to update us within this paper. With regard to her points around the town and parish councils, absolutely, we can, should and are working closely with a number of them. I can't do everything, so I think ultimately I'm slightly in the hands of if they want to come and talk to us, my door is open at any time. I've already worked with a number of the parish councils. We've already worked with a number of the neighbourhood plan areas. I referenced Broadstone earlier on, where we've had 3 meetings recently. But if Councillor Dedman has any influence there, then I'd be very open to either having a meeting with them informally, or even going to one of their town council meetings and talking about this in a collaborative way. I think that's exactly the type of thing that we should be doing.
Chairman, can I just come back and say, yes, thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. We will, I'm sure, be seeing you.
Brilliant. Look forward to it.
Okay. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I may have misheard this, but I'm sure you sort of said that consultation was a dirty word, but I may have misheard that. And my problem is that actually is in reality true, because like Councillor Dedman, we've certainly seen very little consultation with the Christchurch Town Council so far in respect of the High Street. We've in contrast to the 26 responses you've had in respect of the High Street, we've had 1,200 responses in respect of our own survey. And I do think that we feel as though we certainly should have a big input into this, and I do feel that you are relying far too much on the cabinet member plus, if that's the right word, for Christchurch, because actually he doesn't speak for Christchurch. And what I was appalled to see this morning is an email on the 13th of November, which sets out some quite specific actions which he's talked about with you in respect of Christchurch, which I knew nothing about, and nobody in Christchurch Town knows anything about. Apparently the email was copied to Peter Hall. So the only people that know anything about these proposals are members of the Conservative Party. And if consultation is only going to be with Conservative councillors, then that's pretty bad consultation as far as I'm concerned. And certainly there's a lot of angry feeling at the moment in Christchurch, because this has only just come out, and we want to, basically we want some explanations, and certainly, be prepared when you come to Christchurch for some fairly heavy questioning as to what these actions are going to be and how are they going to be developed, because there's certainly people in Christchurch across the political spectrum, and that includes Conservative councillors in Christchurch, are angry about what's going on and how it's going to be developed. And so, as I said, I accept what you said, that this survey consultation was a test, but it can't be relied on completely, and you need to go out there further in more detail to the bodies. And I appreciate you want us to come to you, but actually I think it should be both ways. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead, are you prepared for the onslaught?
I welcome the onslaught, and I mean I mean this in a really constructive way. I don't recall ever having received an email from the Christchurch Town Council offering to work together, and I'd absolutely love to work together. And the fact that they've got survey findings going into the thousands, absolutely we can and should be working that into a combined pieces of work going to the future. So it does work two ways. My door is absolutely fully open, and if I actually want to work together, if you don't ask, you don't get. So ultimately, if you want to have further meetings, I'm all up for it. I don't know which email Councillor Cox is referencing from back in November, but as we've evidenced in this report, as I've said before, I think there is a danger sometimes of a we know best attitude with a number of things. And Act 1, Step 1 should always be just to open your ears and listen. My comment about consultation being a dirty word, I think my words were consultation is often perceived to be a dirty word because people are so used to it being an over-formalised process that then local authorities in particular go, well, that's absolutely lovely, thank you very much, and they go off and on a jolly and do what they were always planning on doing anyway. What I would like to do next, as part of the feedback from this particular informal consultation, is to pick out some really good ideas and go, right, you've said, we've listened, now we're going to do. And I think that might be, dare I say, one of the future strategies that may well come out of our High Street strategy. We've got our Futures Fund now. Do we want to be taking a much more interventionist approach to our high streets, having listened to people on the ground? And that people on the ground also includes town and parishes councils that I really hope will engage.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby, please. Do you want to come back, Councillor Cox?
I'm just about to say thank you for the offer, and you I'm sure, well, I know you will be invited, speaking as the chairman of the Resources Committee, and will certainly be invited very shortly, I would imagine. But the email I referred to was sent on the 17:15 by Councillor Brooks to Councillor Mellor, copied to you and Peter Hall. And that doesn't seem a very inclusive way of talking about some quite significant plans in respect of the Civic Centre, the Estonia Lane roundabout, the Saxon Square Centre car park, the Saxon Square shopping centre, and the Waitrose Fountains Way. You know, quite recently, you turned around to us Christchurch councillors and said that you take our opinion. You know, you want us to make the decisions. That's what she said, particularly in respect to the last one. And yet here you are excluding me anyway, because that's all about my ward. And yet I was not consulted. I had no idea that these 5 quite significant proposals were in train.
Could I come back, Chair, if I could?
Yes, go on.
Just for any members of the public watching this, just so that we're not getting a bit confused here. I think I've now established that what Councillor Cox is referring to is a private email that Councillor Nigel, as the lead member, sent to the leader and myself and another member with his suggestions of areas that should be a priority going forward and ways that we could do them. To my knowledge, none of that has happened without under the radar. And actually, I would urge as many other members, lead members or otherwise, that have ideas that they want to throw out to us about Christchurch, about any area, to be able to do that. And I think that's absolutely correct. The idea that this somehow means that there's a load of different projects that are currently underway and we're hiding under a rock because we don't want any scrutiny on it is absolute bonkers. And I think that was a collection, if I recall, of on the ground information and ideas that Councillor Brooks has put forward, and I absolutely welcome those. Now, a number of those projects that you talk about are going to be taken forward probably by the Urban Regeneration Company or otherwise, which will be done with greater member involvement. So I think, you know, let's not overinflate a private email of here's some things that I think you should be focusing on to some kind of malicious Christchurch takeover.
Just very quickly, please.
Just come back. I'm not trying to conflate this into some sort of malicious campaign. And what I'm suggesting here is that, you know, if you're going to do consultation, do it properly and include everybody in it. And and I'm not blaming you because you were just CC'd in the email, just to make that clear. You know, this is, in my opinion, this was Councillor Brooks' problem because he had some significant ideas, quite a few of which I probably agree with, that he's putting forward. And I didn't know anything about, and you know, I kind of think that I should have been made aware of these significant proposals, which I hadn't been.
Okay, I think you've taken on board what Councillor Cox has said, Councillor Broadhead. I'm sure that you'll ensure that all the communication lines are well and truly open if they haven't been already. Councillor Rigby, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Slade, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Edwards, and then Councillor Howell. And once we've got to that, And if we could do that as quickly as possible, please, because I'm going to, you know, 5 o'clock is the deadline for this meeting. So, Councillor Rigby, thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick. Thank you. I'm going to change the tone. I'm going to be a little bit complimentary about the High Street consultation report. It's not often I get 200 pages deep into reading for these meetings and actually enjoy the following 200 pages. So it was quite nice to have that for a change. I just want to draw attention as the ward councillor for Winton to the comments which came in from Winton, which are really good from my perspective. It's mostly talking about traffic calming, street widening, pedestrianisation in some places, which I think is all really good. And that theme kind of runs through quite a lot of the responses which we've had. There's been a lot of talk about increasing green spaces, widening pavements, and traffic calming measures. There's other bits about parking as well, etc. But my questions around not what's actually contained in this report, but we've done a lot of street vendor licensing at the moment temporarily for cafes and bars and things like that, bringing trade out onto the streets to deal with COVID. And I was just wondering how that's being monitored and if that's something we'd be looking into once things go back to normal a little bit, because it seems as though it fits quite well with a lot of these comments about utilising the pavement space and widening it and actually using it for trade. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a really strong theme that comes up, and you know, I think we'd all agree that one of the positives, if you can say, out of the pandemic is that ability and that desire people have to be spending more time outside. And isn't that absolutely great? Because one of the secrets to the longevity and the future of the high streets is to give activity and somewhere that people want to, I think the word is dwell, that comes up in a lot of these analytical pieces of work about future of the high street. Give people the reason to dwell, and actually they'll spend money and they'll bring activity, and that comes forward. You may well have seen the push that I put forward earlier on in the year to turbocharge, I hate that word, but to want a better word, turbocharge of the pavement licenses. Government gave us some emergency powers to be able to do it. It was, I think, being underutilised. So we've made a big campaign, and we had a number of different people come forward with the using those emergency powers. I've been doing some work, and I've been certainly making some representations to government, as we are in a number of these areas, of using these emergency powers and giving some permanence to them, because I think we've seen the real benefits of that real spread out of a number of businesses onto our high streets. So I'm actually quite hopeful that those emergency powers will become a little bit more permanent, because I think the pavement licenses system in the past has been quite cumbersome, quite bulky, and probably geared towards a computer says no rather than computer says yes approach. So I think hopefully there's something we can learn from that. One of the things that I'm going to be spending the next few months doing as I look through the report, picking up on that second point about the kind of the widening of pavements and everything, is that we have so many. We all probably agree that we'd love to widen more of our pavements and increase expenditure in public realm. We've just never had the ability to do it because it's been very, very dependent on government grants or LEP involvement, for instance. And that's precisely one of the things that when looking at maybe going a bit further on with the futures funding. You know, a good example and a kind of a test of this is the design brief that we're undertaking on Westover Road, because that's clearly an area that has seen better days and needs some significant investment. I think there's a very widespread opinion that a really good way to fix that is to extend the public realm there, probably bring the traffic perhaps only down to one lane, and you create a whole extra public realm to be able to do exactly the points that you've raised that people want to see more of in Winton. I think we can do that now with our futures funding. If we can make a good case for it, we've got complete control over that. And I think it will pay dividends over and over again for the local economy. So I think, to use a word that the leader used earlier on, we're going to be looking at being much more interventionist with some of these things, because frankly, because of the new financial strategy that leaders put together, we're going to have the ability to deliver on some of these things. So it's really interesting hearing some of these, and what I really hope to be able to do is take some of these and then actually put them into action, because that is exactly what people want to see us do.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few issues here, and I'm bit disappointed that Councillor Brooks isn't actually here, because he's been the subject of a lot of the conversation and as the lead member on this, but he's not present. So I apologise for speaking about him and his work with him not able to speak for himself. I hope you're able to fill in the blanks for me. It was great that we were able to have a meeting in Broadstone, and speaking as ward councillor, but also Trafford Forum. You know, it was great to eventually be invited to attend that. But I'm a bit frustrated, I have to be honest. We are very fortunate in one way in having a Broadstone neighbourhood forum and plan, which gives us an element of self-determination regarding what happens with our neighbourhood SIL portion, and the same would be true of Paul Town and Sandbanks and Boscombe. But I'm nervous about whether that's going to lead to those areas not getting funding from BCP monies, in terms of if this leads to a strategy where BCP spend the broader taxpayers' money, future fund or any other type of money, that areas like Broadstone end up saying, well, you've got your own money, you can spend your own money. That to me would be completely unacceptable, because Broadstone, as I'm sure you're aware, is the main shopping area that supports Creekmore, Canford Heath, Merley, and also places outside BCP like Corfmullen and Upton, as the only place that has high street banks and other places like that. So I'd like some reassurance that, as well as having the freedom to spend the neighbourhood SIL, which every other ward obviously has the neighbourhood SIL, that we're not going to be expected to fund significantly different levels of infrastructure, which is the impression I got. The second issue I've got is, and again, Councillor Brooks isn't here, paragraph 18 of the report talks about Councillor Brooks' empty shop strategy, and what he developed and presented a project which has the support apparently of businesses, landlords and agents. And I've got quite a lot of feedback from major agents and landlords to say that no one's asked them. So I'm really interested to know who has been asked. Perhaps the bid has been asked, but what about the agents, landlords and businesses specifically, because that's referenced in paragraph 18. What can we expect in terms of the officers working at pace? Because that was some time ago that he flagged that, and the feedback that we've had from the major agents is no one's approached them. If we're not approaching the major agents in Bournemouth, then that doesn't feel quite right. And finally, I refer back to an email trail from the 23rd of March, and it didn't include you. It was between myself and Councillor Brooks, where I asked him what was happening with regard to engagement with ward councillors on their district centres, also suggesting that it would be useful to actually visit those centres to understand on the ground what's going on. And the response I got at the time was that Councillor Brooks was putting together something so that councillors who have district centres in their wards can think about what improvements would be beneficial. Is that the consultation with the public, or is there something else? Because I've not had anything since the 26th of March on that, apart from the meeting that we've had. And I just feel that if you're serious about having a Cabinet Plus member who is receiving a significant SRA to do this job, I would expect to see them out and about in those areas and actually bringing forward ideas, not just putting their name to a consultation which is full of residents' ideas and that's it. So what's happened since the 26th of March that I'm waiting, because apparently he's going to come back to me shortly, but it's now been 3 months. So I'm just a little bewildered. I recognise strategies take a long time, but I think we should have had more than a public consultation document in the meantime.
Well, Councillor Broadhead, looks like we're going to be struggling for this 5 o'clock finished. So, but if you could answer, please, thank you.
I'll try and be quick. Firstly, I'll answer those on behalf of Councillor Brooks, but the situation with overview and scrutiny is that we have to be invited to overview and scrutiny. So I don't believe that Councillor Brooks had an invitation to come. So I think maybe one that we just need to join the dots on in the future, because we've had similar instances. So Councillor Brooks not being here is not through a lack of involvement, because he's, you can never not call him anything but involved. But I don't believe he actually had a formal invitation to attend from the board. Look, a number of things to unpack there. The neighbourhood sill and the Broadstone situation. I think fundamentally, and actually, aren't they in a great position, because they have a really good chunk of the neighbourhood portion sill, because they get the extra amount to be able to take forward. I've received a number of proposals for them recently, most of which are just help us to use our funds rather than a specific request for extra funds. And obviously other areas are going to have access to their own neighbourhood sills in many different ways. I think need will come really high up on that agenda as we go forward, both listening to results of consultation and people on the ground, and then a bit of analysis of making sure that we get the best bang for the buck, for want of a better term. I think to be really complimentary about Broadstone, Broadstone, as you pointed out, Councillor Slade, is it covers quite a big area. And because of that, I think they get the economies of scale that some other areas don't. And I don't believe there are any empty units there at the moment. It has a real sense of place already. It is a vibrant, almost a beacon of how a local high street should be. Clearly, there are improvements, and we're talking to them about using that in using their funds in the future, and more strategically how we can work together. But in terms of a formal commitment that I'm going to be funding every high street the same, it's just it's going to be very much on a kind of an as and when basis. And I know that's not you were necessarily trying to get towards, but I just think from a public point of view, need must come first, and clearly there are areas that are going to need more of their own funds than others. Am
I allowed to just clarify that just very quickly? I would. Is that okay, Chair? I just want to say no. I absolutely am not asking for that. I simply want an assurance that it is based on need, and that actually the fact that some areas, not just Broadstone, other places like Christchurch, Boscombe, Sandbanks, have access to more of a ring-fence pot isn't going to remove them if they happen to have need. That's all I'm asking for, an assurance.
Absolutely. And my only delicate point was, if they've got more money to start with, then overall in total their need may well be less compared to other areas that don't and perceive to have more endemic problems. So compliments to the Broadstone and the way it's run. It's a really nice area, and is it feels very, very vibrant at the moment. Clearly there's lots more that we can do together to work and make it even more so. The empty shop strategy is referenced in here. We're trying to really give it some meat now. I won't go into too much detail, but we've been working with officers just about some of the legal implications of some of the strategy, because we are, again, being interventionist, to use that word. And so just a few things that we need to work through the system of its how it would be implemented. We have actually engaged with a number of agents and indeed landlords and freeholders. So obviously you can't do anyone, but only in the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've had a really positive meeting with one of the major agents in the BCP area, and actually Councillor Brooks and I have a meeting with one of the big land owners and landlords of one of our areas. I think only maybe even this week, it might be later on this week, who is interested in the proposals. So it is very much there, and I'm hoping that particularly passing this through Cabinet will give some added impetus to try and take this forward even further. Finally, on the groundwork around making sure that we're actually out there, and Councillor Brooks is out there. Almost a day goes by without me getting an email from Councillor Brooks, and in that, Phil, I've been out and about here. Here's my initial thoughts around some of the things we can be doing. That kind of email that Councillor Brooks referred to earlier on, that type of thinking, which I very much welcome. And as we move forward, now that we've got both his scouting exercise on the ground, the feedback from this early kind of consultation, and as we look to kind of flesh out what we might want to do more with things like the Futures Fund and working with our bids, then I think that will translate into action. When we get to the stage that we've got proposals that we're working up, I think that's the time to be engaging more with people. But I actually really welcome the work that Councillor Brooks is doing at the moment. He's been absolutely everywhere across our conurbation, and we reference the fact that we've got 19 High Street. 19 is an awful lot, actually. There's an awful lot of high streets that we've got, and I think it's absolutely brilliant that he's out and about feeding back.
It would be lovely if when he's out and about that he picks up the phone to the ward councillors and says, why don't you walk that street with me, because you probably understand the history. And I would really welcome if he's listening to the call, because all members are encouraged to attend ONS. I'm sure he could have attended even if he wasn't invited to speak initially. I would really welcome him actually coming out and having a cup of coffee. I'm sure most of my colleagues would feel the same way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. In this report, there's no mention of public transport. Now, that's vital to get people to work, to the shops and to the leisure. So was this omission intentional? And with specific reference to Bournemouth Square on the buses, are we encouraging less polluting buses? And that would then comply with your paragraph, cleaner, greener and safer, because Bournemouth Square is none of those at the moment with those diesel buses down there. And I know the bus station saga is a very long one and we'll never solve it, but if we could make the buses cleaner, that would be a good sort of start, really.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, just as a reference to earlier on the meeting and the play on words, that omission wasn't deliberate by any stretch. This was very much an update on some of the pieces of work that are going on at the moment. The transport one, you're absolutely right, is going to be completely integral to it going forward. There is actually, and I apologise that we couldn't put everything into this paper, but I just at the very least thought it would be a good update for a number of the more kind of on the ground stuff that's happening. Interestingly, with regard to public transport and the future sustainability, Councillor Mike Green will know more about this than I do, but I understand that there is an initiative with Moorbus at the moment about them launching a fleet of electric vehicles, and I know that we're being really supportive of them with that, and Mike's been working really closely with them. And actually, we've been having conversations with their competitor, for want of a better term, the Yellow Buses group as well, who have similar aims in that arena. So a bit like the electric car debate that's going on, I think events are going to overtake us really, really quickly in this sphere. But again, we have been talking, both Mike and I, collaboratively and separately to government about using the ability that we have in the BCP Council area to be a trial area in some of these things, because we're a really good size and we've got a really decent critical mass of almost 500,000 people, probably more than 500,000 people in the travel to work area, but not too big that it's absolutely unviable to be launching some of these trials. And public transport's one of the areas that we're talking about that. That's in addition to the work that I know Councillor Green is doing around some more innovative mass transit solutions that we're looking at as well. So it wasn't a deliberate omission, but there's so many things that are connected to the high streets, and I couldn't get them all into this paper.
Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Firstly, with those last points, can I suggest that we set aside some time as a committee to have the lead members who are relevant to our subject matters in, and we talk them through in the same way that we have their heads of, the local bids in. It'd be good to have them in front of us, because there is no, they are lead members. They speak for all councillors presumably, but there's no, they're remarkably absent in terms of communication. I would. In terms of the report, it's pleasing to read the recognition that the R-Cubed task force was a good initiative and successful in moving things forward. We've worked very hard to establish that in the last administration, and it's good to see that things are still continuing. There were actually 4 working groups. It says in the report that it has 3 working groups, but there was a 4th one on reimagining. and that's obviously that was reimagining the economic status really of the conurbation and what kind of dynamics were likely to happen in the future and how we would best position ourselves economically as a conurbation. And that clearly links into what the leader was saying earlier as an ambition to try and to get to the same place, and also actually links into the discussion about BDC and development. But yeah, I'm surprised that that's not mentioned, and I'd like to know, there was quite a lot of work done in there. We had Bournemouth University in leading workshops and a wide range of contributors who were drawn from the other three groups largely, but they were the kind of people who were in a state to start looking forward and not in crisis management response mode. And I produced a couple of pager, which was a guide as to how things might move forward. So I'm just interested if that went anywhere. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, I'll be quick again. I disagree with Councillor Howell. I don't think the R-Cube group concept was a good initiative. I thought it was a brilliant initiative, and all credit to you for driving that forward. It's got legs, it's got longevity, and we've been using it to take it very much to the next level. I think on the reimagining point, I think that the angle that we've taken is that, it was built into the R-Cube, the Respond, Recover, Reimagine, that the group should be doing that as part of their remit. And actually, I think probably about 3 or 4 months ago, we certainly took a strategic pivot for a number of those groups to move away from the recovery and more to the reimagine. And that's why I was really pleased as part of the grant funding that we gave out as part of the stream 3 of the additional restrictions grant and under the kind of the bounce back challenge heading, that we were able to let them put their money where their mouth is and give each of the R-Cube groups £70,000 of the grant money so that they could actually do that reimagine work. So rather than have a separate reimagine work stream, we've given them £70,000 each to use the expertise that comes from all of the different sectors and outside of the council to drive that forward. Now, one of the R-Cube group, the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure group, that I believe you were on before, Councillor Howell, has the pitch that they made for that grant money was to do 2 pieces of work. First of all, one about events and how we can use events to drive forward our place and make it an eventful place, as they call it. I think that's absolutely what we're seeing as part of our Festival Coast Live agenda. They want to go even further and have a strategy around that. And then the second point is the one that you raised, building on the work that you've done about what do our futures of our town centres look like, but driven forward with a piece of work that's driven forward by the industry. And they're going to be using about £40,000 of that grant money to carry on that work and to bring something back to us. What I love about that is it's not, although it's funded by the local authority, it's not a local authority driven piece of work. It's very much driven by those in the know on the ground with businesses, albeit in collaboration. So I don't know what the timescale of that piece of work is, but it should be landing with us shortly. And that complements all of the other work that we've been doing through key cities, through other bounce back work and the high street strategies of our own. So it's not dead, we're building on it and we funded it too.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Sorry, I'm going to have to go to Councillor Brown now. We're just run out of time, I'm afraid. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick point actually I wanted to make. I was reading through the consultation feedback, and there's interesting feedback there, and I like some of the engagement to sort of gain people's comments. The pin dropping, that sort of thing. But I'm a little concerned that approach to consultation is just aimed at social media users on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn. And I'm concerned that the feedback will be skewed to those sort of more online savvy social media users who have probably got a high propensity to shop online and do click and collect and actually aren't busy out each day going and doing their family shopping on the high street. So what about the views and comments of those who don't really do online and they're regularly out using our high streets to do their family shopping? I don't really want us to go down the line of ending up designing our high streets to satisfy online shoppers and social media users when you've got regular shoppers going up and down the high street who maybe haven't had an opportunity to put their views in about the high street they're using every day.
Yes, Broadhead.
I think Councillor Brown is absolutely bang on. I mean, part of the reason for doing this was to test the technology. And I flagged up earlier on some of the really interesting points in there about who didn't engage. And we got really high levels of engagement by this very informal process. And it is self-selecting as well. In areas like, Westbourne and Southbourne, where there's a relatively more affluent and very engaged digital-led community. And also areas that were really quite deprived, where people really had something to say, that they thought there was room for improvement, such as, Paul High Street, for instance. But those really on-the-ground areas, like your Charminsters that I said earlier on, very, very little engagement. Or I'm actually, on the one hand, pleased to see that, because it means there's a hole there. I mean, there's either two solutions to that: either everything's fine and hunky-dory and they've got nothing to say, or this method of digital reaching out doesn't work for certain communities. But you only know that by testing, and that was why we wanted to test this. This is not the one and only consultation we're going to do on High Street, Scott. This is going to go on for years, I'm sure. But I thought it was really interesting. I think it's a really good point that you've raised, Councillor Brown, about sometimes these are very self-selecting and they don't get all the communities, and sometimes you learn more about what you don't hear than what you do hear.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Members, we've got one more agenda item, which is the forward plan, but I propose now to postpone that until the start of 6 o'clock, because otherwise we won't get a chance for any tea or anything before 6 o'clock. So with that, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I'm going to bring this meeting to a close now. Thank you.